Ready, y'all?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Everybody good? Good morning.
Morning.
Go ahead and call to order the April 19th, 2022 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this time, get an echo there. You ready there?
You cued
Just
it.
1 second while we correct a technical issue. At this time, it's my pleasure to invite Captain Lou Trope from the Indian River County Jail. He'll come up and present the invocation. That'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Joseph Flesher. And we will start this meeting with a moment of silent reflection for our first responders and members of the armed forces. Would everyone please rise?
Father, as we reflect on the armed forces, on the first responders, let us continue to beseech you to protect them, to continue to guide them. We thank you so much for this wonderful country that we're blessed to live in. Father, we continue, as I say, to pray for our first responders, our military, our law enforcement, and all those who put their lives on the line for their country, for their city, and their community on a daily basis. We give thanks for the beautiful city in which we live. We pray for these men and women on this board whom you have entrusted to help guide and lead the county through its many, many obstacles. Father, we look at the agenda today and we see that it's a proclamation for volunteers. We thank you for all the volunteers and the many clubs and organizations and all throughout this community that help make this a better community. We think of National Alcohol Awareness, and we pray for those struggling with that awful addiction. And Lord, we know that you could touch their minds and touch their spirit and deliver them from that alcohol addiction. Lord, during the past few years alone, this county commission has faced the problems that the pandemic has brought. They had to make some tough decisions on how best to protect our schools, businesses, and citizens of Indian River County. During these and many more issues, you have guided them through it. Father, among other situations, they now face the task of a population that has grown exponentially. This brings on new challenges in many areas of our county. We ask you to continue to guide them through these challenges. Father, we ask that you give them the wisdom of Solomon, the heart of David, and the leadership skills of Nehemiah today and in the days ahead. And in your Son's holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
As Chaplain Louis said, a place that we're blessed to live. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the greatest nation on earth, the United States of America, land of the free because of the brave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chaplain. Commissioners, we have an addition to the agenda. The St. John's Water Management District would like to make a presentation on their Central Springs East Coast Regional Water Supply Plan. And if we approve this, we will move it to 5E to follow the other presentations and proclamations. Are there any other additions, changes, emergency items for the agenda?
No. Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Moss, second by Commissioner Flesher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 5-0. We now move to our first presentation, and it is my extreme honor to make this presentation to Pansy Jagru on her retirement. And Pansy, why don't you come on up? And I think you've got some family members here, so you all come up and stand behind her. Pansy, you stand right behind the microphone, because we're going to want to hear from you when this is all done.
My son will
Okay, well, I'll go ahead, I'll read the presentation first, and then we'll hear a few words from you, okay? Awesome. This is a proclamation honoring Pansy Jagru from her retirement from Indian River County Board of County Commissioners, Department of General Services, Library Services Division. Whereas Pansy Jagru has announced her retirement effective April 28, 2022. And whereas Pansy Jagru began her career with Indian River County on June 9, 2000 as a library clerk. In December 2002, she was promoted to library technical assistant position, and then her next promotion was in October 2004 to a library associate 2. In June 2013, she received a further promotion to librarian 1 and held that position until her retirement. And whereas Pansy Jagru has served this county and the public with distinction and selflessness, providing customer service to library patrons of all ages. During her almost 22 years of service, she was dedicated and appreciated by her employer, citizens, and coworkers alike. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the board applauds Pansy Jagru's efforts on behalf of the county, and the board wishes to express their appreciation for the dedicated service she has given to Indian River County, and be it further proclaimed that the Board of County Commissioners and staff extend heartfelt wishes for success in her future endeavors. Adopted this 19th day of April 2022 and signed by myself as chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. Pansy, thank you for your many years of service, and if you would like to say a word, or if your son, that would be great also.
My son will say something for me.
Awesome.
Good morning. Thanks for having us today. Definitely wanted to say something on behalf of my mother. She wrote this along with our family. Good morning. Pansy, our mom is retiring today from the Indian River County Library. Wanted to start off today very quickly by just telling you a few things you didn't know about our mom. Our mom, we're from Guyana, South America, right? We're proud Guyanese Americans now. You know, we love this country and provided many things for us and our family. Our mom in Guyana, though, you know, we had a different life back then, and she owned 2 restaurants in Guyana, you know, at the same time. My brother and I, we grew up in the restaurant industry, great time. That's where she got the cooking from. That's where she would bring in all the food to the library and all the events. And then our mom was also a dart champion, national dart champion, 4 years in a row.
Holy moly.
In Guyana, right? That's where the competitive side came from, the toughness of, you know, everyone has to be on time and be at work and so on, dress right like we are today. And in 1999, my parents, you know, decided to move us to Vero Beach, where our dad received a job at Flight Safety as a flight instructor. So they sold everything. We moved to Vero Beach just for a better life for my brother and I, because we were at that age where we were getting ready to grow. In the beginning, it was not easy. You know, for immigrant families like ourselves coming from another country, you need stability. That's the main thing that, you know, keeps the family going. The library provided that stability, along with giving our mom the passion to grow again, find purpose, and rebuild, because now we're rebuilding our lives. That stability over the 20 years saw my brother and I graduate right here from Vero Beach High School. We attended IRCC, we graduated college FAU, and our father, Stanley, who's here today, became the director of Flight Safety Academy right here locally in town. But before all of that, as you mentioned, our mom started out pushing carts at the library. You know, she had a part-time position, then to library clerk, then library associate, then supervisor for the next 17 years. She's taught us many things in life, but the big thing she's taught us is not about the things we gain or attain, it's about the people that we meet along the journey. You, along with all of the patrons and the community, are part of our mother's journey for the last 22 years. And if you're 22 years, as she would say, if you're a clock watcher, is 192,852 hours, by the way. But as tough as she is, she loved it here. Mr. Zito, who I have not met yet, but he has said to her mom, you know, that she's the face of circulation. She called us immediately and said, "Hey, Mrs. Zito said this," and we know you're a very important guy too, by the way. But she said that, you know, and she was very proud of that moment. The library was our mom's passion. It was the reason for her to fight and make things better every day, but the time has come for you guys to give us back to us. We're ready for her. We're ready for a babysitter as well. We're forever grateful for the experiences and respect that you've given to our mother, and her time here will always be remembered in our family and generations to come. On behalf of the Jagru family and our mom, Pansy Jagru, we'd like to thank the administration, previous directors, current directors, assistant directors, and staff. Ladies and gentlemen, Pansy is leaving the building. Thank you.
Very good. Well, first of all, it's very impressive to hear your immigration story and have come here to America and Vero Beach and been highly successful. So certainly a very heartwarming story to hear. So you all should be very proud of what you've done. Now, as a young boy growing up and that whole DART thing, you know, I'm envisioning Pansy saying, "Go clean up your room and don't make me go get the darts."
They're good at it too.
We didn't lose at any
And
sport.
laundry.
Here we have
Don't make me go get the darts. Mike, did you want to say a word or?
Thanks, Pansy. You know, when I said you're the face of circulation, it's true. And not just your presence, but your mentorship of the younger librarians and associates over the years has been a tremendous asset to the library system, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Well, Pansy, come on up. This is your ticket out of the building, and bring your family with you. We'll get a few photos. No, come right up here, yeah.
Thank you.
Does the family want to come? 'Cause
Yeah, the family needs to come up.
Come on.
yeah.
Yeah,
You can have,
what about the
um,
little guy?
If you want to give your camera to,
Yeah. I guess you're going to be
Stick
seeing
around,
Grandma a
right?
little more.
Granddaughter and grandson take care of it.
congratulations.
Everybody come on up.
So a couple of you get on the, there you go.
Take your picture.
Does the little one have a library card yet?
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Enjoy.
All right, now enjoy her.
Absolutely, absolutely, you're going to volunteer.
There's still volunteer opportunity. I'm going to do something about Appreciation Week. Okay? You're a diamond.
Next, we have a presentation of a proclamation designating the week of April 17th through 23rd, 2022 as National Volunteer Appreciation Week. And this will be presented by Commissioner Flesher. Commissioner Flesher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity. I see the sheriff is here, and I see a few of our volunteers that are here. Sheriff, I'm sure if you brought all the volunteers, you would have difficulty in operating the sheriff's office because they have obligations. And no one appreciates the volunteers that volunteer at the sheriff's office more than I did about 2 o'clock in the morning when there was a scenario and we needed individuals to ensure public safety. And many individuals that volunteer with the sheriff's office roll out, get into their uniform, leave their families, and serve the people of Indian River County without any pay or consideration, and they are there in a heartbeat's notice. But we are a very blessed county as you go to the hospital or you go to the Humane Society or any other endeavor here in Indian River County. I think Indian River County is a land of volunteerism. There's a lot of people that get up in the morning that just want to volunteer, and I'm hoping that one of the employees that just left the room wants to volunteer. I just encouraged her. We'll see how that works out, but she's got to be with her grandchild as well. Anyway, I'd like to present this proclamation designating the week of April 17th through the 23rd, 2022 as National Volunteer Appreciation Week. Whereas volunteerism strengthens communities and improves social problems and enhances the overall quality of life of all citizens, including children, seniors, those who are disabled, impoverished, imprisoned, homeless, physically or mentally ill, or otherwise in need of assistance. And whereas volunteering changes the lives of volunteers in a positive way by increasing self-confidence, self-esteem, and physical well-being, offering the chance to make new friends and providing opportunities to learn new skills and abilities. Whereas volunteerism is proven to have a positive influence on business that are socially responsible by increasing employee morale, loyalty, and teamwork, and building goodwill toward the company. And whereas nonprofit charities, community and faith-based groups, schools, volunteer centers, and national service programs in Indian River County have joined together, and state and local governments in celebration in praise of volunteers who have given tirelessly and selflessly to the service of others. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the week of April 17th through the April 23rd, 2022, be designated as National Volunteer Appreciation Week in Indian River County, and the Board encourages all citizens to promote the spirit of volunteerism, to observe the appropriate activities and programs and ceremonies supporting volunteerism, and to participate and engage others in volunteer activities now and for as long as they are able. Duly adopted this 19th day of April, 2022, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Sheriff.
Good morning, Commissioners, and I'm honored to be here accepting this proclamation from you. We have a number of volunteers at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, but as you mentioned, we've always been the one who accepted this proclamation, but it really is the entire community. There's so many volunteers across Indian River County, and so many organizations, partner organizations that we work with that have so many volunteers as well. And so although the face of the Sheriff's Office and our volunteerism has changed a little bit after COVID, some of our more elderly volunteers were concerned about coming out and interacting with the public, things like that. We've made some adjustments to that. We do still have people working in the building. We do have some of our folks working in victims advocates, in the garage, and a variety of other capacities. We are certainly honored that these folks spend their time giving back to their community, whether it be with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office or with any other organization. So thank you for taking time out of the agenda today to recognize these volunteers. It's amazing what they do for our community. They save tax dollars, and we wouldn't be able to do our jobs without them. So thank you to all the volunteers out there, and thank you to the County Commission.
Sheriff, you have a few volunteers with you today?
Althea is here with us. She's one of our victims advocates, and then just some of the other team that manages some of our volunteers are here. As you said, our volunteers are busy, so they can't all be here, but we'll certainly come up and take a photo with you.
We could have filled the room.
We could have, absolutely. Without
You have a lot of volunteers,
We do. Yep.
and we're blessed. Thank you.
Morning, Sheriff.
Thank you guys.
Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Close enough. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ron.
What's going on, Amy? Oh, you just got clothesline. Don't bring him next time.
Next, we have a proclamation proclaiming the month of April 2022 as National Alcohol Abuse Awareness Month in Indian River County. This will be presented by Commissioner Moss, and we have someone here to accept the presentation. So, Commissioner Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. Alcohol, we don't always think of it this way, but it is a drug, and as with any drug, there's an opportunity for abuse. So I urge anyone, whether it's an older person or a younger person, and apparently there are high school students now, getting into trouble with alcohol, so please seek help if you find yourself on that path. Younger people, speak to your parents or other family member or a teacher, and definitely get help. And I welcome, this is Ms. Liz Southers, is that correct? Welcome, and I'll read the proclamation, and then please add to it, should you wish. Proclamation proclaiming the month of April 2022 as National Alcohol Abuse Awareness Month in Indian River County, Florida. Whereas alcohol abuse and addiction transcends all ethnic, racial, and socioeconomic boundaries, alcohol use disorder, AUD, is a chronic relapsing brain disease characterized by an impaired ability to stop or control alcohol use, despite adverse social, occupational, or health consequences, and the effects of this disease are far-reaching. It is particularly devastating because it so often occurs in the privacy of the home and is so readily accessible. And whereas during the month of April, Americans should contemplate the scars that alcohol abuse leaves, and because alcohol abuse usually takes place in private, many Americans may not realize how widespread it is right here in our own county. More than 60% of high school students in Indian River County do not believe that daily alcohol use is harmful to them. The percentage rate of binge drinking among adults in Indian River County rose by 5% since the previous measure by the United Way of Indian River County Community Assessment. And whereas each year in the United States, more than 14 million adults and 414,000 adolescents suffered from AUD, and 8 million Americans reported binge drinking on a monthly basis. As unsettling as these statistics are, it is also disturbing to realize that the behaviors of parents with AUD and the stressful family situations caused by the parent's condition can negatively affect children in the areas of health, academics, and psychosocial development from ages 6 to 17 years. And whereas our prosecutors, law enforcement officers, and addiction specialists have worked together with Just Believe Recovery to reduce the rate of AUD in our county and help addicts and their families through the recovery process. Through education, awareness, and enforcement, we are striving to prevent AUD. Public action awareness will create a society that promotes strong values, fosters a safe and loving home environment for every family, and offers resources and support to those who need it. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the month of April 2022 be designated as National Alcohol Abuse Awareness Month in Indian River County, Florida. This board urges all citizens to actively participate in the scheduled activities and programs sponsored by Just Believe Recovery to work toward the elimination of drug and alcohol abuse. Adopted this 19th day of April, 2022, and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners, Indian River County. And welcome Ms. Southers from Just Believe Recovery.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Good morning, commissioners and guests. My name is Liz Southers, and I'm the Community Liaison for Just Believe Recovery Center in Jensen Beach, Florida. We believe recovery is possible for everyone. Our mission is to provide each person who enters our program with the highest level of care and personalized treatment. At Just Believe Recovery, we are a local, community-based organization committing to serving those struggling with alcohol and drug addiction. We are not only focused on intervention treatment, but we are also committed to awareness and prevention in our community. Our staff members serve on the Treasure Coast Opioid Task Force, Drug Free St. Lucie, and we work closely with the Martin County Sheriff's Office and the 19th Judicial Circuit of Martin and St. Lucie County's drug court programs. We want to get into Indian River County too, so if you know somebody. In 2021, our admissions helpline fielded an average of 5,800 monthly calls, and we had one of Florida's lowest recidivism rates at only 14.9%. I wish I were here today to tell you that the incidence of alcohol use disorder in this beautiful paradise of the Treasure Coast has been decreasing. However, the opposite is true. We must recognize that a drug and alcohol pandemic has existed long before the COVID outbreak. This public health issue and resulting isolation has only exacerbated the incidence of drug and alcohol use disorder. What you may not know is that currently Just Believe Recovery offers 20 scholarships per year into our treatment centers through our Gift of Life scholarship program. This year, our goal is to double the amount of scholarships through additional fundraising initiatives. We hope you will keep an eye on our upcoming events and help us raise funds for our most vulnerable citizens who otherwise have limited access to treatment programs. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Would you like to come forward?
Yes.
To receive this?
Thank you.
Come back, come back.
Oh, picture.
Hold your proclamation up, there you go. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation designating April 2022 as Water Conservation Month. This will be presented by Commissioner Adams. I think we have some St. John's folks and water people here, so y'all come on up. Commissioner Adams.
Thank you so much. All right, as everybody makes their way up, it is my honor to read a proclamation designating April 2022 as Water Conservation Month. Whereas, water is a basic and essential need of every living creature. And whereas, the state of Florida water management districts and Indian River County are working together to increase awareness about the importance of water conservation through various educational programs, community events, and improving stormwater and wastewater treatment. And whereas, Indian River County and the state of Florida have designated April, typically a dry month when water demands are most acute, as Florida's Water Conservation Month, to educate citizens about how they can help save Florida's precious water resources. And whereas, all water users, including commercial, industrial, agricultural, institutional, hospitality, private citizens, and others, can make positive contribution to reduce water use and protect our water resources. And whereas, the majority of Florida's drinking water is supplied by underground aquifers, and our quality of life and economy depend upon a clean and healthy environment. And whereas, Indian River County is calling upon each individual and business to help protect our precious resource by practicing water-saving measures and becoming more aware of the need to save water. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that April 2022 be designated as Water Conservation Month in Indian River County, and all citizens are encouraged to use this occasion to increase their awareness of the importance of water conservation and the need to use water more efficiently. Adopted this 19th day of April 2022 and signed by all 5 county commissioners. And I see we have people from multiple organizations here today, including our own utilities department. So if y'all would like to say anything, you're welcome to do so. I don't know if you have any activities planned for Water Conservation Month, but anything we can do to help conserve the precious resource is wonderful.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really great about Water Conservation Month being in April is that it tends to be the time of year when it's a little bit drier, right? And we all as people can collectively maybe think about our lawn irrigation during April. There are things that, maybe not that we do ourselves, but when you multiply it by all the people that live in Indian River County, actually can make a difference in what's happened with the water use in the county. So just appreciate the county adopting this proclamation, just bringing awareness to the, think about how we're using water, because conservation can really help stretch our water supply. So thank you to the commission.
If you could just give your name and position so the audience does.
I'm Clay Corsi, the Division Director for Water Supply Planning and Assessment at the St. Johns River Water Management District.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean?
I'll take a minute to say a few things. Sean Leesky, Director for Indian River County Utilities. Coming from Colorado, which is a very, very dry state, and water conservation being critical, I certainly understand the importance of water conservation, extending our water resources, allowing those water resources to be used primarily for drinking. And so, considering that April is a dry month, and I don't know if there really is a dry month considering we're in Florida, but I understand it's a drier month. It seems like it's been raining a lot, but it is important, and water conservation is a critical tool in our toolbox to extend our water resources for the purposes of drinking and other uses. So I do thank the Commission for your proclamation of April being Water Conservation Month. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? All right, well, you guys like to come up and get a picture?
Thanks for coming down, Sean. And for your comments this morning. Cindy, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
See you. Coca-Cola. Coke John.
Thanks for asking.
Good, how you doing?
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
Don't be shy, it won't bite. I'm not, I can't guarantee it.
All set?
Thank you.
Next, Commissioners, earlier we had added the next presentation, and that is a presentation by Joy Kochjohn from the St. Johns River Water Management District regarding the Central Springs East Coast Regional Water Supply Plan. So, Joy, come on up and welcome.
The mouse? Okay. Okay, good morning, Chair and Commissioners.
Good morning.
My name is Joy Kochjohn. I'm the Regional Water Supply Planning Coordinator for the Central Springs East Coast Planning Region of the St. Johns River Water Management District. Today, I will be briefing you on the Central Springs East Coast Regional Water Supply Plan, which was approved by the St. Johns Governing Board in February, and will provide you with some updated information relevant to Indian River County. Okay, as a reminder, regional water supply planning is required by Florida statutes for areas where existing sources of water are not sufficient to meet current or future reasonable beneficial uses of water while sustaining water resources and associated natural systems. Water supply plans look 20 years into the future. Plan development is conducted in an open and public process, including coordination with stakeholders and other agencies. Components of a water supply plan include population and water demand projections, an assessment of available water supplies to determine if current and future demands can be met with traditional sources without harming Florida's natural systems, and if not, the plan includes management strategies, water conservation potential, and alternative water supply projects that communities can implement to meet future needs. Plans must also identify funding options and should be updated every 5 years. The Central Springs East Coast, or Seasick region, as we fondly refer to it, is shown in green and is one of 3 planning regions of the St. Johns River Water Management District. It includes all or part of 6 counties, including Marion, Lake, Volusia, Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee. The Seasick region is the only planning region within the district that lies completely within the St. Johns boundary, and it includes 6 outstanding Florida springs. Because water supply planning is an open and public process, district staff held over 38 meetings and 4 public workshops to communicate to stakeholders the technical methods utilized in plan development, along with the water resource issues in the Seasick planning region. The draft water supply plan was posted online from July 12th to August 27th of last year for public review and comment. All received comments are documented in Appendix M to the water supply plan, along with the district's response to each comment. Stakeholder comments were incorporated into the final version of the plan where appropriate. The Seasick Regional Water Supply Plan was presented to the St. John's Governing Board for consideration on February 8th, at which time it was unanimously approved. The Seasick Regional Water Supply Plan is a comprehensive plan covering the entire planning region. However, we did divide the area into 3 distinct subregions: Volusia County, Northern Lake and Marion counties, and Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee. This was the result of the technical tools available at the time of plan development, along with the diverse water resources and water resource concerns present within the different subregions. The Seasick planning region is unique in that it does not have a single regional groundwater model that can be used to assess potential impacts within its boundary. 3 different groundwater models were utilized to assess the entire Seasick region, and they are shown on the map. The East Central Florida Transient Expanded Model, it's a mouthful, or Ecftx, as we like to refer to it, was utilized for the Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee subregion, and its boundary is shown by the blue hatched line. Details and results for each of these subregions is provided in Appendix A of the Seasick Regional Water Supply Plan. So for this presentation, I'm going to focus on information within the plan specific to the Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee subregion. So one of the first exercises that is employed in water supply plan development is the review of historic population and water use in order to develop population and water demand projections for the 20-year planning horizon. This chart shows historic and projected population and water use for Brevard, Indian River, and the Okeechobee subregion at 5-year intervals. Water use and demand is shown by the bars, with colors representing the different water use categories, whereas the black line shows historic and projected population. What's really dramatic on this graph is you can see that historic agricultural water use, shown in green, decreased significantly between 2005 and 2010, due in part to a greater than 40% decline in citrus acreage in Brevard and Indian River counties over that time period. Population in this subregion is expected to grow by 180,000 people, or 34% by 2040, while water demand is projected to increase by only 14%, or 23.5 million gallons per day. Agriculture represents the largest component of 2040 demand at 40%, again shown in green, followed by public supply at 33%, shown in blue, and landscape recreational use at 16%, shown in purple. The next step in the water supply planning process is to incorporate the projected water demand into the groundwater models to predict potential impacts and determine if traditional sources can meet projected demands while protecting water resources. For the Seasick planning region, including the Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee subregion, we evaluated potential impacts to water resources by performing an assessment of whether projected future withdrawals affect water bodies with minimum flows and levels, or MFLs, groundwater quality, and wetland function. Here's a slide showing the results of the MFLs analysis. The map shows the name and location of the 3 assessed MFLs in the subregion. They include 2 lakes, Fox and South, and 1 river reach, the St. Johns River, downstream of the Lake Washington Weir. All 3 of these MFL water bodies are currently achieving their MFLs and are projected to achieve their MFLs at 2040. Moving on to water quality, 75 Upper Floridan aquifer wells were analyzed for statistically significant chloride trends in the subregion. 22 of these wells were district monitor wells, and 53 were permitted public supply or agricultural wells. The analysis identified 21 wells, or 28%, with a high rate of chloride change, as shown on the map by the triangles. For planning purposes, a high rate of change is defined as a greater than 3 milligram per liter per year increase in chloride concentration. All 21 of these wells are colored red to show that they currently exceed the 250 milligram per liter chloride secondary drinking water standard. This is to be expected as the Upper Floridan aquifer is mostly brackish in this subregion. The analysis concluded that upconing is likely responsible for many of these increasing trends. Groundwater withdrawals are projected to increase by 18.4 million gallons per day by 2040. So how might increasing chloride trends impact users of the Upper Floridan aquifer? Utilities and commercial and power generation facilities who utilize the Upper Floridan aquifer already have the treatment capabilities that likely wouldn't be impacted by a projected change in chloride concentration. Agricultural users, however, also rely on the Upper Floridan aquifer to meet all or part of their irrigation needs, and we know that increased chlorides can impact what crops can be successfully cultivated. The analyzed water quality data from agricultural operations in the region did not show increasing chloride trends. However, the data is spatially limited and is contrary to anecdotal information received from some members of the agricultural community. Based on certain trends and activities in the region, it is possible, though, that future impacts will be limited. Public supply demand is expected to increase by 29% over the planning period, while agricultural demand is projected to decrease by 11%. It is expected that the conversion of agricultural land to develop parcels will continue. In addition, the continuation and expansion of the district's abandoned artesian well plugging program will further reduce wasteful discharge of groundwater and may mitigate some increasing chloride trends. Finally, as a reminder, the district's regulatory program evaluates the potential for harmful upconing and lateral intrusion during consumptive use application permit review to ensure all permitting criteria are met prior to permit issuance. In addition, regulatory staff investigate reported instances of unforeseen harmful water quality impacts, and if verified, will require mitigation by the responsible permittee or permittees. As part of the water quality analysis, 101 superficial aquifer public supply wells were analyzed for statistically significant chloride trends in the subregion. The analysis identified 22 wells, or 31%, with a high rate of chloride change, which are displayed again as triangles. 8 of these wells currently exceed the 250 milligram per liter chloride secondary drinking water standard, and 12 additional wells are projected to exceed the drinking water standard by 2040 if the trend continues. These wells are shown as the red triangles. Increased chlorides in the superficial aquifer, specifically above the 250 milligram per liter standard, is a concern as the superficial is historically fresh and declining water quality is indicative of a stressed aquifer. 70% of the domestic self-supply users rely on the superficial aquifer in Brevard and Indian River counties, and predicted water quality changes are a concern. Fortunately, the district is not aware of any reports of poor water quality from domestic well users. Deviations from well field management strategies likely cause some of these increasing trends. Future adherence to well field management strategies, along with implementation of projects to replace superficial withdrawals with alternative water supplies, will allow chloride concentrations to stabilize and potentially improve. The wetland analysis identified just over 340 acres of wetlands at a moderate or high potential for change as a result of increased pumping projected for 2040. The majority of this acreage is located near well fields that withdraw from the superficial aquifer. This regional wetland evaluation is meant to be a planning level assessment of areas potentially at risk. The analysis does not replace the more in-depth monitoring and impact verification performed by district regulatory staff. In evaluating potential projects to help meet projected demand, the district first estimates water conservation potential and additional reclaimed water availability projected for the planning region. In the Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee subregion, water conservation potential is estimated to be between 13.8 and 18.2 million gallons per day at 2040. In addition, reclaimed water projections show up to 22.6 million gallons per day of additional reclaimed water available by 2040. This is the only Seasick subregion that can achieve the increased water demand at 2040 of 23.5 by achieving the low estimates of both water conservation and additional reclaimed water utilization. In addition to estimates of water conservation potential and future reclaimed water availability, the Seasick plans identifies water supply and water resource development projects to meet future water demands in the Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee subregion. 16 water supply development projects were identified for the subregion. Once constructed, these projects have the potential to deliver up to 29.2 million gallons per day of water to meet future demands. Projects include the additional provision of reclaimed water and the development or expansion of alternative water supplies, specifically surface water and brackish groundwater. The plan also identified 5 water resource development projects with a total capacity of 37.4 million gallons per day. 2 of these projects will redivert historic flows to the upper St. Johns River, and the remaining 3 projects properly plug abandoned artesian free-flowing wells. The Seasick plan provides a summary of cost share awards within the planning region. For fiscal years 2014 to 2020, the district provided over $12.9 million in cost share funds to cooperators in Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee counties. Approximately $3.8 million was awarded for projects that increase water supply and conserve water. Since 2020, the district has added over $7 million in cost share awards within the subregion. The Seasick plan concluded that the projected 23.5 million gallons per day increase in water demand in Brevard, Indian River, and the Okeechobee subregion cannot be met with traditional sources without predicted impacts to water quality. Although there are identified water quality concerns, this is the only subregion in the Seasick planning region where the projected increase in demand can be met entirely through implementation of water conservation measures and through the additional provision of reclaimed water, both at the low estimates. When including the water resource and water supply development projects, there are 105.1 million gallons per day of total projects and measures identified in the Seasick plan that can be implemented in the subregion to meet future demand while protecting water resources and related natural systems. At this point, I'd like to brief you on a few items that I think will be of interest to the county. As I'm sure you are aware, the district and the county have a 50-50 cost share agreement for the abandoned artesian well plugging program in Indian River County. Late last year, the district governing board made several enhancements to the district-wide program as they realized how cost-effective it was. Typically, when we discuss water conservation and alternative water supply projects, the implementation costs are reflected in dollars per 1,000 gallons saved or supplied. For the abandoned well plugging program, when you extend the water savings benefit over 20 years, which is conservative, the cost can amount to less than a penny per 1,000 gallons saved. Implemented enhancements to the program include increasing visibility of the program on the district's website and increasing outreach to local governments, agencies, and the public. In Indian River County, these enhancements resulted in the plugging of 13 wells in approximately 4 months for a water savings of almost 3 million gallons per day. So far, the district has more than triple matched the county's contribution, and there are still 5 months left in the fiscal year. District staff recently went back to our governing board, this time to request additional program funds in order to keep up with the increased demand through the fiscal year. The governing board approved an additional $375,000 in funding for this year. Next year, in addition to requesting an increased budget, there are plans to increase the pool of well plugging contractors. Since the 1980s, the Abandoned Artesian Well Program has abandoned 481 wells in Indian River County with an estimated water savings of 150 million gallons per day at a cost of only $1.6 million. The district values the county's contribution to this vital program. These are dollars well spent that really get a big bang for the buck. The district's agricultural cost share program has been very effective in Indian River County. Since 2015, the district has awarded almost $3.5 million via 23 cost share awards to agricultural projects within the county. These projects have resulted in water conservation savings of 4.3 million gallons per day and the development of approximately 500,000 gallons per day of alternative water supplies. The slides show 3 completed projects in Indian River County. On the left is a sun egg project, which converted to a more efficient irrigation system. In the middle is a blue goose growers project at River Bridge Farms, where they converted to surface water for irrigation. And on the right is another sun egg project where they installed a weather station to improve irrigation scheduling. In a previous slide, I mentioned the Ecftx groundwater model, which was utilized for the water resource assessment in the Brevard, Indian River, and Okeechobee subregion. Specifically, we utilized version 1.0, which was developed as a water supply planning tool. Just recently, a modeling team from St. John's, South Florida, and Southwest Florida water management districts released version 2.0, which can now be utilized for MFL evaluations and for assisting in regulatory decisions. Benefits of this new version include improved calibration, better performance, and a user-friendly regulatory tool that is available to permittees and their consultants to assess withdrawal impacts. Both the groundwater model and the regulatory tool are available for download on the Central Florida Water Initiative website. So that concludes my presentation. All the Central Springs East Coast Regional Water Supply Plan documents can be found online at the listed website. My contact information is provided if you have any questions or concerns after today's meeting. At this time, though, I am available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Jory, thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions, comments?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Moss?
So it sounds to me as though the supply will definitely fall short of the demand. That's the projection, if I understand it correctly. And what is being proposed is that the difference will be made up, if you will, by water conservation and reclaimed water, and you're using the low estimate on the reclaimed water. What, if any, specific plans are there with regard to water conservation? Because it seems like that will be a very important thing going forward.
Right, so the water supply plan, lists a bunch of general water conservation components. I think the water conservation is really up to the individual local governments, also the consumptive use permit holders, to determine which which of the different methods they choose. It's required as part of a consumptive use permit to have a comprehensive plan, but those are really, it's more of, we provide a list of all the possibilities, and it's up to the local government to determine which will work best for their particular circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
Sure. I just had a couple questions. There was a slide that showed the withdrawals affecting wetlands, and potentially affecting wetlands, and the area in western Indian River County / Okeechobee County that was kind of identified with a lot of those little dots. I believe that is the Fort Drum area. Is that related or projected to be related to the withdrawals from the FPL plant for the water that they were withdrawing for cooling?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So one of the things, and if you were to look at the maps for the entire planning region, wetland impacts is actually, that for this subregion, they're very minimized, the potential. There's not a lot of interaction between the upper Floridan and the surficial. There's a lot of confinement, which is why you really only see the potential for impacts near those well fields where they're actually withdrawing from the surficial aquifer. So I would not anticipate the withdrawals from the FP&L plant, which are much, in the upper Floridan and actually deeper in the upper Floridan, to have potential wetland impact.
Okay, I was curious because you hear a lot of that anecdotally. So, and then I understand the utilization of reclaimed water is something that you guys are encouraging. So have you been working with some of the regulatory agencies? Because I know some of the regulations related to how we can use reclaimed water has made it difficult for us to be able to use it more.
Absolutely, and I know that that is a concern for Indian River County. I'm actually really excited about working with your new Public Works Utility Director to kind of come up with some, I know it's challenging. I know you've had to kind of pull back on some of your reuse because of water quality issues in the lagoon, but I think that together we can come up with some solutions where it can be utilized beneficially while at the same time not causing impacts to the Indian River Lagoon. So that's something that I really look forward to working with the county on in the relatively near future. I know that there's some Senate Bill 64 stuff going on, and so I think this is an important time to start looking at those so that we meet all the goals. Beneficial reuse, but also water quality goals of the lagoon. It's tricky.
Yeah, sometimes they seem to be conflicting, but I think
Absolutely.
Agreed, if we can work together to try to break down some of those barriers so holistically it becomes a better cyclical pattern would be fabulous. So thank you so much.
Commissioner
Mr. Chairman.
Berman?
The wells, the plugging of the wells, have y'all have pursued that? Y'all have been pursuing that and been doing it yourself? The problem access to some of the landowners, I mean, it's on private property, things of that nature. How are y'all overcoming that?
Well, see, I don't have the specifics relating to that. I do know that it's the responsibility of the landowners to maintain, that we do have some legal authority. And I think by offering to pay for, actually dealing with the problem, I think we get a lot more willing landowners because they're not having to front the bill. I do know, so I don't know any specifics. I just know that, being able to cover the cost rather than have the property owner cover it, I think it helps. It definitely helps us with access.
So most of the time it's been a property owner just contacting y'all, say, hey,
So we rely on the public, and that's why we're really increasing, our talking about the program. A lot of times a developer may purchase an old citrus grove, and no one will even know about this well until they go on and start surveying the property. Sometimes, we have, the public, they'll go for a walk. They walk through the woods and they see this water coming out of the ground. So really, we rely on the public to report these instances to us. And as more and more land gets developed, I think we're finding more and more wells.
That's true, because I know we've got some that here that are undocumented, so you're gonna have to find them like that.
Absolutely.
They weren't permitted back in the 40s, 50s, early 60s when citrus was king. So that's an issue we're having there. I'm pleased to hear this, but I'm not really, the results, it's just telling to how many people are gonna be moving to Florida, what the demand is gonna be on our system. I could see in the future alternative water sources, whether it's above ground, whether it's above ground storage, open storage, things like that you see in, other states throughout the nation. I hope we don't get to that, maybe not in my lifetime, but it'll be interesting to see. It's something we definitely have to keep a watch on. I appreciate what y'all are doing with this, and I appreciate this information. And, I have some concerns, but I don't know if we have the time to discuss all of them here today. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to touch on something. We, as most jurisdictions, are looking at irrigation conservation and limitations. And that's, of course, on the upper water aquifer, not the lower water aquifer. And where Commissioner Ehrman had pointed out, the grouting of wells is extremely important, as well as you did. On the conservation efforts on the shallow wells, how much does that affect our availability for water, realizing that there's a hard pan and a split, and it's two different worlds?
Yeah, it is really two different worlds. And in this part of, there's, like I said, there's not a lot of interaction. But at the same time, we do rely on a fresh superficial aquifer. We talked about some domestic self-supply. We talked about, I think it's more in this area for your water bodies. I think it's important. But as far as it really affecting the supply of from the upper Floridan, it does. I don't think it really does. There's not a lot of connection there. So it's kind of a different story. And the story is, we still need to conserve water. Make that water available for the water resources. For those cases where we actually have individual, homes that get their potable water from these wells. So it's a little different of a narrative, but it is still important.
It still does have some sort of impact. I just want to make sure that we're not feeling good by having conservation efforts on the upper aquifer and believing that we're going forward to ensure that we have water for the future.
Well, and I think it's also important. Well, it's important for the resources as well. Okay, we definitely need, because if you have a saline, potential for saltwater moving in, you're going to have changes to the vegetation. There's going to be a lot of other changes. But really, what I'm focused on is water supply. So when we're talking about water supply in the upper Floridan, they're kind of two different systems there. But it is important. It's important to the resources for them to remain healthy, as they are, and not turn into a more saline type of environment.
Thank you. And also, we're encouraging water storage, water collection, the old rain barrel philosophy, and because I know where our utilities director comes from, it is unlawful to collect rainwater in any form. If you have any kind of container outside the house, you can get fined for collecting rainwater. It's a whole different world. But here we encourage the collection of rainwater.
Yeah, and one more thing I'd like to point out is not everybody waters their lawn with a superficial well. Many people water who are connected to a utility, they actually pay for that water, and that water is brackish groundwater that is treated. And if we cut down on irrigation from a utility standpoint, that allows them additional water to supply to the growth. So I think that's an important thing to remember. A lot of times people don't even realize where their irrigation water comes from. So we kind of treat it as a common pool. I think it helps with messaging as well.
More and more are domestic water or utilities delivered assets as well.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. And but there are a lot of folks that are irrigating it at 130 feet, which really does not affect our aquifer.
I would say yes. There's just a lot of confinement there, which is why you don't see a lot of wetland impacts.
Yes.
Okay, it's the
Yes.
same type of thing. Because we don't see a lot of impacts to the superficial from our groundwater withdrawals in this area.
Thank you.
Joy, thank you for your presentation. Couple things. When you talk about the increase in the chloride levels, I assume you all factored in sea level rise?
That is something that we are currently developing a tool to be able to do that. We understand how important that is to factor in these analyses in the future. And so we're actually developing a modeling tool where we can look at various pumping rates in addition to various sea levels, and to be able to get a handle on how that will impact our water supply. So that we are anticipating that will be ready for the 5-year update to this plan.
Okay, and then, the question is always, do you use the low projections, the middle projections, or the high projections? I assume you look at all three and have a best case, worst case?
I believe, no, for this area, we do use the Beaver medium. We use medium
Okay.
projections.
All right. And then also, when you talk about the decline in agricultural use, I think that's true currently because citrus has taken such a beating. But we're seeing a lot of alternate crops come into the county now, repurposing these citrus groves. We have a fairly large row crop producer now actively in Indian River County. And we also have a dragon fruit producer. So have y'all looked at potential trends going back upward in ag use based on these alternate crops?
Well, actually, Florida statute requires us to consider agricultural projections from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So as part of the Central Springs East Coast Regional Water Supply Plan, we actually took the projections from Ecftx. And one thing that I did recently was compare to those projections that are in the Seasick plan to more recent projections that have come out from Ecftx, and they're still reporting or still anticipating a significant decline in acreage. So we will continue to look to Ecftx to provide us those projections, since that's more in their expertise. But what we are seeing is with the reduction in acreage, we're not seeing as much of a reduction in water use because of changes in like multi-cropping and whatnot, that they are anticipating to increase. But we really look to Ecftx for that information.
Okay. And then, I don't know, it seems like it's 6 months ago, it might have been a year, but in an earlier presentation from St. John's, I believe they said that the groundwater that we get in the aquifer actually originates in Polk County, and they called it the Polk Dome or something, and the water, flows from that head and comes across to eventually reach Indian River County. Are you familiar with that, or?
I'd have to look specifically. I think I remember reading something about the Lake Wales Ridge being a big recharge area, provides a lot of recharge for this area for the upper Florida, but I'm not really, don't know exactly where that is offhand.
Okay. So let's just assume my memory is somewhat accurate and it's coming from Polk. Okay. When I looked at the maps of the East Central and then the sub-regions, it is hard to tell, but it looked to me that actually the Polk County area was 2 sub-regions away from us, and that water would have to go through Polk County, Osceola County, and then get to Indian River County. How do we get input into factors to, or what does St. John's do to prevent that too many straws don't go into Polk County, don't go into Osceola County before that water gets to Indian River County?
Yeah, 2 points I'd like to make is, one, I think the map that looked like it was 2 planning regions away is because Polk County is in the Central Florida Water Initiative, some of which is in the St. John's district, but it also expands, that planning region expands into Southwest Florida and South Florida. So I think what it looks like, it has to move through Central Florida in our district and then to the rest of the planning region. So it's actually only one planning region away. And then if you remember the groundwater modeling slide, and I didn't point it out, I mentioned it, but if you remember the blue rectangle and how it spanned coast to coast and pretty far north and south, that is the groundwater model where we look at impacts within Indian River County and in addition to other counties within the Central Florida Water Initiative planning region. So we take into account withdrawals within that entire planning region. So we do take into account what's going on in Polk County.
Okay. And then my final question is actually kind of just the bottom line question. Based on the projected population increase for Indian River County and the current water supply levels, in 2040, will we still be able to use our wells to supply public use water in 2040?
So I think one of the strategies for public supply utilities, not only in Indian River County, but even in St. Lucie County, kind of like this geographical area, is there is water available in the upper Florida aquifer. There is brackish groundwater available. It's how you manage those withdrawals. And what that's going to mean is it's going to mean less withdrawals from your existing wells. It's going to mean drilling additional wells, and it's going to be spacing those wells further out. I think that is really what I think there is going to be water available, but those are the strategies if you continue to use the upper Floridan in order to minimize upconing, in order to minimize impacts to nearby users. It's going to have to be managing those withdrawals over a larger area.
Okay, and then my last thing is, and this is probably out of your pay grade, but we have a lot of water stored in Indian River County. And my understanding is a lot of it flows north now. If we ever were to need a surface water supply, would we be able to tap into that existing storage in Indian River County?
So I think in order to make to respond to that, I think there's additional information that's definitely.
Kind of figured that, but
yeah.
I want to get it out there because I think that's a question we need answered. Okay, because we have a lot of land under water storage in the county right now, and it seems to me, why should we spend 50, 70 million building another surface storage facility when we have a lot of surface storage right here already? And so I think at some point we would like the answer to that question. Can we tap into that existing storage? So, and like I said, I know you can't answer that, but if you could pass that up to the powers to be so we can get an answer to that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Commissioners, anything else? All right. We don't normally take public comment on presentations, but we did kind of add this as an emergency item on the agenda. And we do have a request from the Indian River Neighborhood Association to make a brief comment on the water supply. So at this point, I'll go ahead and ask Dan Lansom to come up and make their statement. Morning, Dan.
Morning. Thank you very much, and thank you to the St. Johns River Water Management District for compiling the water supply plan for our area. We appreciate the data you provided and feel that your exploration of the regional water supply was successful. The district is, however, primarily concerned with the St. Johns River and ensuring water supply to our friends and neighbors to the north. The concerns of the IRNA are much more local. In the 18-county district, there's a population of 5.65 million people as of 2020, and our county makes up just 160,000 of that. We're small, and most of us live outside of the headwaters of the St. Johns, and so we're in a unique position. Going over some of the basic data, our population is booming. We've doubled in population since 1983, and are projected to add almost 100,000 more people by 2040. And that's a lot of new people. And one complaint with the regional water supply plan that we have is that it is regional. Regional studies are great at kind of showing what's going on over a large area, but zooming in on a particular area, like Indian River County, can be more difficult. In the main report document, I searched for the words Indian River, and it only came up 20 times, and 6 of those were referring to the lagoon. So we were looking for something kind of more local. and there's a great deal of backup in the appendices and a lot of good information there for sure. But some of it does cause alarm, and it appears kind of like we see the BMAP process. It sounds good. It would be nice if it solved our problems, but it doesn't address all the questions. And in this case, at our current growth rate, will we have an adequate supply of water? And if not, what should we do about it? Water conservation is definitely an important alternative to consider, and it deserves increased attention. We request that you, the commissioners, consider possible alternative courses of action. Is there a local plan to practice increased conservation? Most of the conservation projects listed in Appendix K were not done by the county, but by private entities. How can we collectively do more? Their superficial aquifer system is a source for public water supply in Indian River County, and we're not the only consumer. Utilities, according to the report, who have historically relied on the superficial aquifer to meet all or a portion of their demand, have been transitioning to alternate sources to mitigate for wetland and water quality impacts. So we ask, what are we going to do to transition and to prepare for a potential need to do so? Frankly, after reading the report, we're not sure how soon we will need to transition to other potable water sources. When will we run out of water? When will our wells become too salty to be of use? How much has the aquifer gone down, and how much more can it go down before it's lost to us? There's a lot of questions, and more than there are answers. The aquifers are not an unlimited source of water. We can drain, damage, or even destroy our water supply if we're not careful. The data in this report was very good to know, but we feel we need to know more. We need to know where we're going to find alternative water sources, and more importantly, when we're going to need them. Thankfully, it's the 21st century, and we have a multitude of methods available for providing potable water. Some may be expensive, some are energy intensive, but there are options. But they do take time to implement, and we need to be thinking ahead to find them. In the past, this board has discussed hiring the USGS to complete a county-wide geohydrology study. We know there have been concerns about the cost, and yes, they are expensive, and yes, they'll take a while, but there are cost-sharing opportunities available, and knowing is so much more valuable than not knowing. A USGS study is just one option to determine our local needs, and there's more things that we can do and explore, I'm sure. We need to know our county's water resources and potential future sources of supply. The local environmental and conservation community are willing to work with you to help you ensure a hopefully wet future. In closing, I want to leave you with a quote from the Regional Water Supply Plan. Results of the water quality analysis suggest that water quality constraints may exist in the coastal counties of the CSEC-RWSP area. Statistically significant chloride trends, specifically in Brevard and Indian River counties, may indicate a stressed fresh aquifer system in the case of the superficial aquifer, or saltwater intrusion resulting from upconing and the lateral encroachment of seawater in the case of the upper Floridan aquifer. Time could be running out. Frankly, we don't have enough information to be able to prepare a sufficient potable water supply for the next 20 years. We need more local targeted data to know what we need to do and when. Thank you for listening, and again, thank you for the St. Johns River Water Management District for compiling the report.
Thank you, Dan. Joy, again, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We look forward to continuing to work with St. John's and moving forward on our water supply. Thank you. Okay. Commissioners, there's no minutes to approve, so informational items. We have several retirements of the folks that could not be here. So we have a proclamation honoring Pari Yagobi from her retirement from General Services, Library Services Division with 21 years of service. Proclamation honoring Mark James Castor on his retirement from the Department of Emergency Services, Fire Rescue Division with 28 years of service. And a proclamation honoring Charlotte Bowling on her retirement from the Indian River County Department of Community Development, Building Division with 31 years of service. So, Pari, Mark, and Charlotte, we thank you very much for your service to the community. And then we also have the Indian River County venue event, and I always like to highlight a few things. We've got the shooting range is real busy. They have several different safety and training programs going on out there, plus a class you can take to get your concealed carry license. So lots going on at the shooting range. So head on out there and learn the safe and proper way to do that. And then, again, near and dear to my heart, the Nautical Flea Market is coming up April 30th to May 1st. We also have the Vero Beach Air Show that same weekend with the Blue Angels showing. And I believe I saw a post from Marty Zickert that, is it a week from this coming Thursday, Blue Angel number 7 lands, and then the noise and the fun begins. So look forward to that. And finally, just put in a shameless plug. On Monday, May 2nd at the IG Center, I am hosting a candidate debate for the County Commission District 4 candidates, and that's at the IG Center, Monday, May 2nd, starting at 5:30. Moving on now to the consent agenda. Commissioners, would anybody like to pull an item for additional discussion? Seeing none, is any member of the public wish to pull an item off consent for additional discussion? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners? We have a motion by Commissioner Flesher, second by Commissioner Adams. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Ayes. Any opposed? That carries 5-0. Next, under constitutional items, a letter from Indian River County Sheriff Eric Flowers regarding a mental health and wellness act program grant. Good morning again, Sheriff.
Thank you for taking time for this. When I took office in January of last year, I implemented Operation Be More Fit, which is not just physical well-being for our employees, and not just sworn employees, either all employees of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, but also mental health and emotional well-being. And that program continues to thrive. We've since developed our STAR team, which is the Sheriff's Trauma response team. They're able to respond out whenever our deputies are involved in critical incidents, a drowning, anything involving a child, anything that may impact their emotional or mental well-being. And so we've applied for this grant. It's $175,000 over a 2-year period. The goal would be to use that money to continue to grow that program, cover some of the overtime, cover some of the extended costs. We're looking at a medical partner to specifically provide, the county administrator and I had lunch and spoke about that, another company that we're looking at to provide specific services to our folks. So far, in our early testing of that program, it's been very beneficial to our agency. I actually have a meeting about it coming up here shortly. And so this money would go towards that program. There's no match on the county side. There's no, I'm not asking you for any sort of additional funding or anything like that. This is to extend the services that we're currently providing and offer more for our employees. So basically just want to let you know that we're applying for this grant. It's a portion of that grant I have to come before the county commission, and wanted to let you know in case you had any questions about what we're doing.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Commissioner, Vice Chair Ehrman.
is this also available to, say, fire rescue employees or anything like that?
This is specific to the sheriff's office. Our program that we're working on right now is specific. However, certainly working with fire and showing them what we're doing. I mean, I believe we're paving the way on this. We've had EAP for years, and we've had discussions about how ineffective that has been for many people who have reached out to it. Law enforcement and fire rescue, for that matter, have their own needs separate from what other people might need. And so this is enhanced. This is a service that is provided by folks who have actually been in combat, people who have experienced things that our folks experience. And so right now, it's still a pilot program. It's still inside the sheriff's office, but we'd be happy to meet with fire rescue and discuss what we're doing for our employees and make sure that they know.
Sheriff, as you know, grants run out.
Sure, of course.
So 2 years from now, is the intent to apply for a grant renewal, or will these funds then be rolled into and become part of your ongoing budget?
I would definitely want a grant renewal, continue to get funding for this as long as we possibly can. It's a great program. It's something that I feel we should continue to expand and grow, but we certainly need to utilize as many grants as we possibly can to supplement taxpayer dollars.
Okay, great. And then just my understanding is part of the treatment program may have, I want to say maybe somewhat, I don't want to say controversial, but maybe unusual treatments.
Yeah.
Is that?
We're working through the contract with them. Our legal and their legal are having discussions, and before we proceed with anything with that company, we would definitely ensure that it's consistent with our policies, practices, and procedures, and we wouldn't have anything that would be controversial for our employees. We would not allow anything like that.
Okay. And years ago, I worked with our emergency services on our CISM plan, and so I'm very supportive of doing all we can to support our first responders. I am sure they see things on a daily basis that I don't even want to have to think about. So I greatly appreciate working to work on their mental health and wellness. Just want to make sure we don't get ourselves in something that becomes a controversial thing or anything like that.
Totally agree, and I'm definitely not trying to get us down that path. I want us to stay in the straight and narrow. Obviously, our employees work in law enforcement, and we need to abide by the law.
Great, awesome, good. Commissioner Adams?
Just to follow up on that, when you are evaluating these programs, I would just encourage you to ask them for their outcomes. The successful programs that deal in this area, of which there are several in our community already, and their partner, our local associations partners, are able to demonstrate those successful outcomes, and that's what really sets them apart from some of the more controversial ones. So as a point of information gathering, I think that's something that you guys should take into consideration.
Jason, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, we take, of course, as well as, of course, with our law enforcement officers, mental health very seriously, and as with our fire rescue as well. We have worked with our EAP and our providers on the fire rescue side to ensure that there are folks who specialize in providing service to first responders and have experience in that. So I believe we're in a good place where we are right now, and we'll always on the lookout for anything that would improve the resources that we have. But right now I think we're in a pretty good place. Chief Stone has worked on this pretty hard, and I think has gotten us in a good place on fire rescue. It's something that we take very seriously. We've had some challenges with our folks, with certain folks that have struggled with some issues in the past, and so we're very aware of the issue and want to do everything we can to make sure we're helping our folks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners? Commissioner Fletcher?
I understand there's no local match, but does the sheriff need anything else from us for today?
I'm not asking for anything additional on this. This is simply letting you guys know that we're going to apply for this grant. No additional needs at this time.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moss?
I'd just like to thank the sheriff for being so proactive in this area. I think it's very important, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Our team, I told them we're going to provide the best care that we possibly can for our folks. We know that people struggle. People are having issues with what they see, and we want to make sure that we're leading the charge on this and that we're providing the best possible care for our employees that we can.
Sheriff, you're not asking anything, then this is just kind of more informational, so we don't need a motion or anything, or?
Nope, just letting you know. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, we appreciate that, and good luck with it, and hope you're successful in the grant.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff.
That's why I was driving.
Moving on, we do not have any public hearings. We do have a request to speak under public discussion from Walter C. Hurst and/or Shirley Nelson, re a 2015 demolition lien on property address at 4470 31st Avenue. Good morning and welcome. If you could just give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Shirley Nelson, and I'm a realtor, and I work with Surfside Properties. I am here just standing in for Mr. Hurst. He lives out of the state, and he couldn't come. The way this all started is basically he, in 2012, and I believe you all have a packet of his description. What? No?
We do not, and I don't know, two things. One, Ms. Nelson, before you, under public discussion, it's normally our policy not to take any action. This is just for us to hear the public to speak on an item, but we normally do not take any action on a case. And it's my understanding that this case is scheduled for the code board next Monday. Now, that might be who all got the whole package and stuff, but we're...
No, you should have all got it for today, and it's listed as today, but there are multiple things. It's not just the code part that we're involved with. He
Okay,
has
but
multiple issues.
let me, again, just warn you, we're not going to take any action on this.
Okay, I guess what we just need to find out is the understanding here. If we went to sell this small piece of property, 70 by 100 feet, and found out there's, almost $100,000 worth of liens and fines. He's never, ever got a notice. Evidently, the address was wrong, at the property appraiser, so he didn't get any notices. So what he's just asking is, can he just pay the fines? And that's what we're working towards, and, you know, I'm here to just try and get it done. We do have a buyer. The property's listed for $35,000. It's in just north of here in Gifford. So we're just hoping that he can just pay the fines and move on. And there's $77,000 worth of liens just for clearing the property. And
So
if we clear
what I would suggest would be the best course, because again, we won't take action here, is to go ahead and go before the code board on Monday and see what their decision is. And then if you're not happy with the code board decision, then get with our community development folks and ask them to put it on the agenda under their matters. And that would be something we can take a vote on.
Okay, the other issue is liens from utilities, and that is part of an ordinance that was brought up last March where the utilities, it was an ordinance that was passed that utilities would waive the fees and the fines up 90% of them if it was all paid up by March or May of this year. Correct. And he didn't get the notices, so he wasn't involved in that. He didn't even know he had a water and sewer bill. Never, honestly did not know that property even had a water and sewer bill. So this went on for, 10 years of it being added on. But as far as being part of an ordinance, how does he get involved where he can now have it, he'll pay the actual bill, but the liens are, $7,000 worth of.
So if you turn around, there's two ladies sitting behind you that are our utilities department. If you would like to get with them later, and they can calculate what that ordinance, what the payment would be, and you can just take care of it that way. So.
Does he fit in that program where he can pay it if it's paid by May 2nd? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I just want to add, oftentimes we have folks like this come forward to the county attorney's office, to the community development department, working with us with regards to some sort of reduction of fine or lien. I just want the board to be clear. You've got someone who comes forward who claims that they've never had notice of anything. We've got a demolition lien on the property. We've got a code enforcement board lien on the property. We've got a utility lien on the property, and we've got someone who hasn't been paying their property taxes. So at some point I question the excuse of we haven't gotten notice, and it's just put my office and I think community development department in a strange position trying to negotiate with someone with so many different things that are outstanding out there. I just wanted to make that very clear.
And thank you, and I appreciate it too, and you can appreciate my position. I just want to sell this little lot for him and clear it off. The actual demolition, I mean, he's willing to pay for the demolition, which was $6,000 and something, but then they've added $3,000 in liens, or in fines in addition to that. How do we handle that part of it? He's willing to pay all of these things that he's being charged for, except he can't do the excess that's been added.
So the most recent examples of this that I've seen by the board is it's been a pay the base plus a 10% on top of that. That's been recently what the board's done, but I think those have been examples when there's been a code lien and a demolition lien. I've got to talk to the staff about the fact that we've got an additional utility lien, that Carol Jean hasn't been paid for years. It just seems like there's a lot more going on here.
But all of it will be paid. It will be paid, and I mean, he only paid $21,000 for the lot, and it's listed for $35,000. We have a buyer from the local area, so it's not over $35,000, I can tell you that. So basically, he's definitely losing a good portion of any money. He's not making a profit on this at all, but he is willing to clear his name and pay the bills that he owes.
Okay. So again, Shirley, I think get with the two ladies behind you to work out the utility issue. Go to the code board on Monday and tell them the same thing you just told us, that he's willing to pay the base charges and maybe a little 10% or something. And then the tax collector is right across the street in Building B. You might want to just check with them what the outstanding balance is on the taxes.
We know that, but the title's been pulled, so we know, and that's fine, we're going to handle that. How about the demolition part?
That would be all wrapped up in the code case.
Well, the demolition one comes to this board, and assuming everything else is going along, I'd be happy to bring something back to the board if all of these other issues are being resolved.
Okay, Okay, and is that like I'm concerned about losing this buyer, so would that be within a week or 2 weeks or something?
The next board meeting after today is May 3rd.
May 3rd, okay. Okay, so basically, start there and then.
Yeah, but
That's happening.
we'll see some progress on the taxes getting paid, the utilities getting addressed, code enforcement board decision, and then I'll be in a position to work with you on the demolition issue.
The only thing we were hoping is that it would be at closing and he could pay all these amounts at closing and not put another 20,000 out of his pocket before he closes, but.
Well, I'm not sure they'll all go along with that. Usually they make good and then we release things, so I think that'd be just my opinion, would be your better course of action.
Mostly with the title companies, it's you tell us what they owe and then it's put on the closing statement. So, but I'll work with them. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shirley. Appreciate it. We have one public notice item. Mr. Reingold, would you do the honors, please?
I guess in honor of Water Conservation Month and the presentation number today, we've got a public notice of a public hearing for May 3rd, 2022 for an ordinance creating Chapter 319, which is going to be Water Conservation Ordinance for landscaping irrigation of the Indian River County Code of Ordinances. Again, that'll be a public hearing scheduled for May 3rd, 2022. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Dylan. And we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break now. We'll come back here at 10:45.
There he is.
And you thought we were important.
You know, if it was a commissioner, I'd wait, but since you're the county administrator. We will call the meeting back to order. We now move on to county administrator matters, an executive session to discuss IAFF negotiations. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So an item that we are requesting is at the conclusion of this meeting, staff is requesting an executive session, which is allowed under Section 447.605 of Florida statutes for the purposes of negotiations regarding the IAFF bargaining unit. So this meeting will be held today, immediately following the regular meeting of the board. The meeting is exempt from 286.011 sunshine requirements. Discussions will be limited to matters relating to the negotiations. Members of the bargaining committee that shall be present at the session include Suzanne Boyle, our Human Resources Director, Mike Zito, Assistant County Administrator, Tad Stone, Director of Emergency Services, Fire Chief Dave Johnson, and Kristen Daniels, Budget Director, and myself. So staff is requesting that at the conclusion of this meeting. This notice isn't actually required. However, for transparency purposes, we have always done it this way. Just wanted to be clear that we are having this executive session. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Nope, I'm good. Any questions? All right, we will convene then immediately following the conclusion of this meeting. We now move on to departmental matters under general services, an update on the Archie Smith Fish House, the ice house demolition. And we have Beth Powell here, and good morning and welcome, Beth.
Hi, good morning. Beth Powell, Interim Director, Parks and Recreation. Thank you for the opportunity to bring you the Archie Smith Fish House information. I have provided a somewhat lengthy and detailed summary in the backup agenda item. It is not all inclusive of every single date or activity that occurred, but I tried to at least provide a highlight of a timeline so that you can kind of piece together the activities that were undertaken by the county since its purchase in 2007. So we'll jump right in. I tried to create a pictorial PowerPoint that would help us to all get an idea of where we have started and where we're at today, so that memory is a fickle friend, and we sometimes forget all of the details and kind of the history. And in this really important historical site that's located in Sebastian on Indian River Drive. So as a refresher, Archie Smith Fish House was purchased in 2007 for $1.7 million. It was purchased with the Environmental Land Bond Referendum. We did apply for a Florida Communities Trust grant. However, that grant was not funded. So the county owns this property entirely, and there are no grant obligations other than when we went to Florida Inland Navigation District and did the what is now the boardwalk and historically was the dock. So the property in total is 1.15 acres. The main structures on the property include the residence, what we have often referred to as the ice house, and I'll clarify that in a minute, and the fish house. So what's interesting about the Archie Smith Fish House is that it was listed on the National Register in 1994 prior to the county's acquisition. And at the time, the Archie Smith still owned the property. And the property was listed, and there's a lot of detail that's provided in the National Register and what's called the master site file. It's a very interesting read. It helps you to get an understanding of the structures that were on the site when it was actually listed. And what I'd like to do is try to clarify a little bit about what structures existed when the county purchased the property, because that had changed over time. So in this photograph here, you can see what is referred to as the fish house and the ice house to the east. And then the structure that we have been calling the ice house, which is actually the crab house. And so we'll talk about that in just a little bit. This is another early photograph that basically shows you that there was a large complex over the piered structure, all these piered structures, including the house, which is to the west or to the right side of your screen, and then net drying racks that were to the middle, and then what you have is the crab house, and then what's the fish house, where the ice house actually was, all the way to the east. So it's an interesting look at historically what was there. In the master site file, we have a rendering that actually labels each of the buildings, and I think that this is helpful. So to the west on Indian River Drive, you have the Archie Smith house. This was the residence, and that building is still remaining. And then you had a net storage outhouse that you had seen on the previous photograph, and that was no longer there when the county purchased the property. We have the net drying racks as you're moving to the east, and then the crab house, which is the house that we commonly refer to as the ice house, and actually erroneously refer to as the ice house, but that's what we had been calling it all these years. And then to the far east, you have the fish house. The fish house was this L-shaped structure that burned down prior to the county acquiring the property, and the ice house was actually located in the fish house. And all of this is described in the master site file. And I put in a little excerpt from the crab house that talks about the description. And one of the things that I found very interesting about this was the Judah family actually lived in the crab house for a time, and then it was converted to refrigeration storage. So they actually converted from the historical bringing ice in and storing that, which was in the fish house, to a refrigerated unit, which I think is how we got a little confused with the naming and called it the ice house, because it was built for refrigeration. So it's very interesting in the 1940s is when that was converted over. So when the county purchased the property, and I like to go back to this original photo here, you can see that we had the Archie Smith residence, and then we had the crab house or the ice house, what we had been calling the ice house, but technically the crab house. Those are the only two structures when the county purchased the property that remained. These are some photographs from 2007, and you can see the condition of the buildings. And I think it's important for all of us to remember, because I was here and I saw these buildings, but my memory had completely forgotten about the condition of the Archie Smith Fish House property when we purchased it. I remembered the house that was on the west side of Indian River Drive being demoed, and then the little shed that stood for a while, and then we also had to demo it. But I had completely forgotten about the condition of the structure in 2007. So I think that this photograph really speaks volumes, and it helps us in moving forward with our decision making and actually understanding how much energy and effort was put into trying to salvage these buildings for so many years. So on the left photo, you can see this is the crab house. You can see the net drying racks, which is to the, that'd be to the west of the crab house. Those had been blown down, and we salvaged as much as we could and cleaned up as much as we could, but over the years that continued to deteriorate, and it had, it was useful whenever it was being used, and they had it set up a certain way, but over time there wasn't really any ability to kind of salvage that, mostly because we probably didn't know what the actual use was. It had been converted from net drying racks to some other operation. We think maybe clams or something like that is what were maybe grown there. And then the bottom right picture is the back side of the residence, just for reference. This is an aerial pictometry, so we love using pictometry in land management. This is from 2007, and you can actually get a sense of the property. So we also own property as part of the 1.15 acres to the west of Indian River Drive, and you can see what is labeled house and shed. Both of those were demoed many, many years ago, and then you can see the residence that's on the east side of the road, and then the crab house and what we call the ice house. And you can kind of see from this aerial photograph the condition of the property at the time that we bought it. So over the years, improvements had been made. The county staff had come to the board. We had applied for Division of Historical Resources grants. It was a large undertaking and moving small steps as much as we could. And, you know, of course, we all, as much as I hate saying it over and over again, we always have to factor in the economic downturn. Everything stopped. So when we have this gap of progress for 7 to 8 years, it's in large part due to that, which just happened to hit right after we were making some substantial acquisitions on our conservation lands. So it wasn't a lack of effort, it wasn't a lack of trying, but I mean, everybody was kind of slowing down and stopping any kind of progress. And then, you know, we've started to pick that back up. But I'd like to kind of give you some photographs here of what the site looked like, the amount of debris that was in the water, the condition of pilings. This is where the actual fish house and the original ice house stood, and those pilings had remained in the water like this. There was lumber and PVC pipes, and at some point we had done some cleanup efforts and restoration efforts, you know, usually after storms or things like that. This is also the back of the building, so it's important to see the condition of the building prior to some of those stabilization efforts that we had made. It was still charred from the fire that had occurred on the fish house. There are, at the top, you can see refrigeration cooling units or something like that. It had something to do with the refrigeration that was put in the 40s, and these were kind of cantilevered on the top of the roof and strapped down, and every time we had a storm they made the roofing structure more and more vulnerable. So those were things that we were dealing with even as early as, you know, 2010. The front part of the property, thanks to Public Works and our facilities group, had come in and done some sort of stabilization of the main house. So this was the residence where the Archie Smith family lived. It had been modified and changed over a period of time. Structures had been added over the water, and walls had been moved, and this is a completely frame house, and it has a flat roof, which we all know is not the best roof to have in the state of Florida with the amount of rain that we get. The walls, everything internal to that is all wood, so it's subject to termite damage, wood rot, etc. So let me see, get the date for you. In 2014, thank you, the county had gotten a Division of Historical Resources grant to work with the Adelaide company to do basic plans for the entire site east of Indian River Drive. This included facilities analysis and structural evaluation, the research and documentation of the history of the structures, which could be also found in the master site file, development of as-built drawings, and that was to basically to memorialize the existing conditions of each of the structures. They also were hired to do development of detailed restoration plans and to do detailed construction drawings and bid specifications so that that could go out to bid for the future and intended purpose based on the Division of Historical Resources grant. One thing that's important to note with Division of Historical Resources grant funding, they do not fund projects to do I'm trying to figure out how to say it, to do plans that create a new purpose for the buildings. So they are solely funding projects to either rehabilitate or restore. They do not do repurposing. They don't fund projects that will create replicas. And this is something that we learned, especially with the Craigle, when we had applied for some Craigle funding, because we were listening and talking to DHR in the panel as they were reviewing our grant. And so when we said replica, it was a very bad word, and it did not go over well with our audience at that time. So in understanding that from the Craigle standpoint, when I look back on the DHR grant and the Adelaide plans that were developed, the primary funding mechanism from DHR was to create rehabilitation or restoration work. Whether or not that makes sense in the long term for public use improvements, whether or not the buildings were ever going to be functional would not necessarily be a consideration. In the main residence house, they did do plans to create basically a museum or an educational or interpretive center. So there's the ability to create basically an open space for the use of the public in that building. But it's still under the primary focus is to restore the building. For the ice house, what's labeled the ice house, but is in actuality the crab house. The crab house had a concrete floor, it had styrofoam-filled walls, it had some concrete walls, it had this A-frame roofing structure, and the plans called for rebuilding that exactly as it was. Whether or not that would be functional or have any purpose for the public, it was irrelevant. It's just restoration. So I just throw that in so that when you see the plans, you understand that the funding mechanism and the purpose was for restoration of the buildings as is. In addition, there were some schematics done to extend the boardwalk to provide boat slips, as well as a floating kayak launch adjacent to and behind the net drying racks. Currently, I have some questions about that because if you're familiar with the site, you would know that that area is only about 1 foot to 2 feet deep. So I'm not sure what boats might be able to access that, and the dock itself is about 4 to 5 feet above the water surface. So being able to get in and out of a boat without some type of ladder would be nearly impossible, and that's if you could even float a boat in. It would have to be some sort of very shallow skiff, and I would even question whether or not a pontoon would be able to float in that shallow water. So that's just another point to make. Kayaking actually might be better from the shoreline, which is open and sandy, and to drag a kayak down the length of that dock probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So again, I wasn't really involved with the design at the time that this was done, so I don't exactly know what the direction was, but these were the plans that we ended up with, or that we have. So I'd like to sort of point out between 2018 and 2019, the county did receive a Florida Inland Navigation District grant. The board approved the basically reconstruction of the dock with an open observation area to the east of the crab house, ice house. And so you can see that that whole area was cleaned up. These extra pilings were removed, concrete and debris was removed from the bottom of the underneath the water. However, the net drying racks had still remained at that point in time. This was a substantial project that, let me see if I have the cost in here. So the cost was $206,000, and these days I would say what a bargain. But at the time, that was a very large project, and it was very well constructed, and it resulted in the county being able to work with Captain Butcher's to open the boardwalk to the public so that people could walk out, to the water.
Hey, Beth, can you go back to that?
Sure.
So the one on the left is the older picture, the one on the right is the newer.
Correct.
The one on the right looks like there's some dredging done in there, or what? Do you know if anything went on with that, or?
We don't know in that particular area. It could just be a water quality issue at the time. It could have been low tide, and so you're actually seeing that area. We have not done any dredging in that area, so I'm not entirely sure. I do see what you're talking about in 2019, and we could certainly look at more current aerials. I believe I do have a current aerial in here as well. We do know that Captain Butcher, so one of the interesting things about that is, when we're talking about boating access, it's a duplicate service to what's already offered at Captain Butcher's. And they have a dredge management plan, which we do not have. So they're able to dredge and manage their, I think you would call it like a little marina or something like that. So there's adequate boating access in that area, which is immediately adjacent to. The rest of the area is very shallow. So I'd say even that area that looks like it's relatively deep is probably, right now, it's probably no more than 3 feet deep, probably 2 to 3 feet deep right next to the boardwalk.
Right. To me, that looks like dredging now, because I can see on the left, there's a boat, long pointed boat right there at Captain Butcher's, and just north of that is a little dark patch that might be grass or something. So I can see that on the left, I can see that on the right, but I see a lot more dark on the right, which to me indicates depth and dredging, just,
Yep, it does.
okay. All right.
So this is a photo from around 2018 when the boardwalk was under construction. If you've been there recently, you know that we have the lights, and we also have a fire extinguisher type, not fire extinguisher, a fire hydrant type system that runs down the length of the boardwalk. That area, Commissioner, that you're discussing is right off of this. Can you see my? Yep, you can. Right off of this area here. I do remember in one of the aerials there is a long reach excavator there, so maybe they do have that as part of their dredge management plan. So I'm not exactly certain, but our property is really close to the edge of our boardwalk, so they may have some management plan in place to dredge that. I'm not entirely certain. You can also see, another thing I like from this photo that you can see is you can see the boundary, the northern boundary of our property with the fence. We had put this chain link fence up early on in our acquisition. And another thing to note is the open beachy shoreline that we have. We have some old photographs from the early 1900s that show this area of Sebastian. And we have to remember at the time, the inlet, prior to the inlet being cut, this was all freshwater. So you had a freshwater discharge from the St. Sebastian River. You had very little, if any, saltwater intrusion coming into this section of the lagoon because it was so far from the other inlets. Mullet was primary fish that was caught by our fishermen, and the lagoon itself was between 2 and 4 feet deep, with very few areas being 6 to 8 feet deep. So at the time, prior to the inlet being put in, this was mostly freshwater. We have photographs of pine flatwoods and cabbage palms reaching all the way down to the water's edge and open beachy shorelines. So sometimes I think we have to just keep in mind, you know, why a certain area. We haven't done anything to this area. It accretes sand, and then sand is washed away over time. Sometimes it's herbaceous. Other times there's just nothing there. And these types of habitats are critical for nesting shorebirds and other wildlife that rely on these kind of rare, you know, habitat types. But this is very consistent with what the historical photos looked like, was an open beachy shoreline. The only difference would have been there would have been pine and some cabbage palms closer to the shoreline. And those are interesting photos that we found in some of our historical resource books. This is looking east, so you can see these stacks that are on top of the building, which continue to pull on the tin or the aluminum roofing that was there. You can see the fish drying racks. The workers are clearly, working on the end of the deck. And one of the remnants that we put in was the trolley. So one of the historical components of the dock that was built was originally a wooden trolley, and then later on metal rails. And I've talked to folks who remember being little kids, and they would pull the fish in and put them on top of ice beds on top of the trolley, and then roll them down the dock as a more efficient way to get their fish catch to the trucks to load them up, generally to put them on the railroad cars to go to New York City and Jacksonville. That's where most of the fish was headed. But it's just a little bit of interesting history, and sometimes people wonder why is the trolley sitting over there, and that's the reason. It's the last little bit so that we can do some educational signage about the trolley and the length. But it wasn't really conducive to having pedestrians walking with rails, down the length of the boardwalk. Would have been a trip hazard. So that project was complete, and as I mentioned, the gates were being opened by the Captain Butcher's staff, and it was open, accessible to the public. The main building or the residence had been shored up to the best of our ability with the help from facilities and from Public Works, and we appreciate their help so much. But as you can see, this photo is from around 2020 when we did the Jungle Trail DHR tour, basically all of the mapping that shows all the different connected conservation areas on Jungle Trail and on the lagoon. But you can see the condition of the building. It is holding together, but it's not in great shape. So we want to point that out as well. This is a photo after the lights have been installed and basically the final project. Here you can see we did some additional work on the crab house to try to close up any of the open areas. The stacks were removed to prevent any more damage to the roof, and the roof pieces, we had roofing pieces that were put back in place to prevent water damage on the interior of the structure. So all of this had been pretty much sealed up to the best of our ability at that point in time. In December, I think it was December 22nd, I received a phone call from someone who was at Captain Butcher's and who had heard a big splash and were noticing that internal structure, internal components of the crab house had been starting to fall into the lagoon. This is some documentation that we took, photographs as we were assessing the condition of the building to try to determine the extent of damage. You can see these pilings were the parts of the building that were actually supporting the entire weight of the building were these wooden piers set in concrete stacked on top of concrete. It was like Legos without the connecting pieces. It was just stacked up like cups in your cupboard, basically holding the entire structure up. So it's amazing that the building was able to withstand Jean and Francis and Matthew and all of these things, but I think just little by little, as these beams had started to deteriorate, the weight of the building, winds, et cetera, may have been of some effect. We did look, there were no significant winds or high wake or wave energy just prior to the beginning of the collapse. So there was nothing that we could really attribute it to it other than just old age. Here you can see the concrete floors had started to collapse into the lagoon. This was creating a massive amount of debris. The walls were lined with styrofoam, so every time wood and styrofoam would fall, it started to float into Captain Butcher's and then out into the lagoon. So our first order of priority was to get an emergency PO and to install a floating turbidity curtain and to pick up whatever debris that we could at the time. We hired a contractor to do this emergency work, and Indian River Docks was hired to do this based on their availability and also based on their familiarity with the project because they're the company who had done the dock. So they were very familiar with the plans and they knew how they could work in this area based on the previous experience. We did install they installed the turbidity curtain around the entire length of the area to try to capture all of this potentially floating hazardous debris. Here you can see we continue to document more and more collapse of the internal structure of the building with really just the frame remaining at this point in time, and in some cases nothing holding it up. You can see in this photo here, this pier is not even attached to anything in the building at this point in time. The building, I don't have a good photo of it, but the building had also started to lean toward the boardwalk right here. So it was actually leaning and putting pressure on the boardwalk. And so we had begun to get really concerned about potential damage to our very expensive, very beautiful boardwalk that we didn't want to have to replace or repair based on the building starting to fall. After a series of permitting issues, which surprised me that we had so many, and there were a lot of permitting issues in order to be able to do the demolition. But you can see at this point, by February and March, we were continuing to assess the building and the condition just continued to deteriorate. So there was not even really a safe way to work under the building to retrieve any of the materials, but you can see from this photograph that the building just continues to deteriorate from the inside. And some, if you were to look at it from the outside, it'd look like it was leaning a bit, but the whole, the skeleton was there, but internally the structure is just not doing well. This is a pictometry photograph from, I believe this was January 2022. You can see the turbidity curtain is installed. You can even see the floating debris on this side that particular day and how everything was wrapped in order to keep it contained at that point in time until we could work through the permitting issues, which we did. And on March, I believe it's March 14th or 15th, the crab house was demoed in place. They brought out a barge with a lot of equipment, and they basically took the building down piece by piece from top to bottom. They also cleaned out, and it's not super easy to see, but I tried to include some photographs here so you could see the extent of cleanup that was done, so that there was, not a lot of debris. As much as they could get out of the water and get cleaned up, they did that work. The net drying racks were also removed, as those had been for many years a concern, with floating debris and damage and just those deteriorating as well. So all of that was removed, and that's the final stage of this particular part of the project. And this is where we're at today. We did have consultation with the county historian, Ruth Stanbridge. We talked about several different options and whether or not there was any, recommendation from her. She seemed to be amenable to doing an alternate structure that would commemorate the crab house and the whole Archie Smith Fish House area, and something that the public could use, whether that would be a docked area with maybe a pavilion or some other kind of structure so people could, get in and out of the sun, but something to basically commemorate the buildings and the history of the site. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the means, and we're bringing this to you today so that you can have some discussion about how you would like to move forward. One of the three options that we had talked about internally with staff was redesign and installation of a reconstructed ice house based on the Adelaide plans, and redesign would be required to meet any of the differences between the plans and the current building department standards. With the entire structure removed at this point in time, that may present some permitting challenges, and we also have some sovereign submerged land lease issues that we would have to address as well. You can see from these plans that it really consisted of just a reconstruction of the 3 rooms, the doors, etc., to the ice house. There's nothing fancy about it. It's not really usable by anybody, and it would be built exactly the way that it historically was. One item to note in the reconstruction discussions that we had, the only way to replace the piers was through a crane or possibly a helicopter, and that was one of the cost considerations when the original fine grant had been approved by the board and submitted, and then that was kind of called back. It wasn't cost effective to be able to reconstruct it based on the plans, and there was really no other way to do that. But we did talk to some contractors about that, and it was kind of like the impossible task. Can it be done? Yes. How much will it cost? Bringing in a helicopter or a crane, and how you would actually make that happen was a big question. Another option would be to install similar fall rails or handrails along the now open edges of the boardwalk. This would probably be the most cost-effective solution. You could still do educational interpretive signage along this area to commemorate the historic structures that were once there. And the third option that we had come up with was designing and installing an alternate structure for public use, which may include decking above this area with a covered pavilion or other kind of structure, and then again, educational signage that would commemorate the ice house, crab house, and the fish house. If we were to make this option, we will have some permitting issues, and time is of the essence in order to make a determination, because as time goes by, DEP is going to be less forgiving about, we once had a structure and now we're replacing it. As that time gap continues to draw out, it would be more and more difficult to permit. Not impossible, just difficult. So just point that out. I just kind of wanted to throw up a close-up view of the Adelaide plans and the surrounding structures. So these are the plans that we currently have, and whether or not the board wants us to move forward with any or a portion of these, plans, we would definitely be open to that. And then these are the plans for the Archie Smith Fish House, the residence, which we would also like some direction on how the board would like us to move forward with that as well. And that's all I have for you, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm happy to move back to any of the previous slides if you'd like to look at those in more detail.
Thank you, Beth. One question real quick on this plan for the house. Up in the upper left, there's a gift shop. So who would run and operate that?
That's a great question. So the conservation staff have recently made an attempt to prioritize our projects based on Florida Communities Trust funding, where we had outstanding obligations to other agencies. Currently, we have, I think, 3 museums plus this, the Archie Smith Fish House. So you can see we're probably not in a big hurry to get this done because we have these other obligations that we need to meet. And then we have the future responsibility to run or operate educational programming and facilities that are part of our plans. And so this one, we could talk about partnerships a lot, but partnerships require staff effort to develop and to implement and to sustain over a longer period of time. Early on, we had talked about whether or not some nonprofit agencies might be interested in using the net drying rack area for oyster research or clam research. I mean, we've had these conversations internally, but the ability to move on projects had to be prioritized based on what I love now is the capital, human capital. We only have so much time in our days, as hard as we work, but we had to prioritize or make a decision prioritizing these obligations that we have with Florida Communities Trust. And so we've done that. We have Craigle Homestead, which is well underway right now, and we also did a DHR grant to do the restoration, rehabilitation assessment of the buildings that are there, where we also obligated to have a museum. And obviously Jones Pier was another one that we had made obligations to Florida Communities Trust, and that's well underway now. So we can turn our attention to Archie Smith Fish House, but we still have a lot of other programming to get up and moving and running on our other sites where we do have these obligations. But yes, this was contemplated. There's no obligation, though, I should mention, to any other, grant agency in order to, to build this. We could do a replica, and it could be just a vacant space on the inside until we have other plans. It's really up to us to decide.
So at the beginning of your presentation, it said that the county purchased this in January of 2007.
Correct.
So I don't know what Commissioner Fletcher was thinking, but we had been commissioners for all of a whopping 2 months at that point in time. And the thought that ran through my mind is, what the heck were we thinking? On things like this, I'm kind of more of a minimalist. To try to recreate something where people would walk out there and say, okay, 50 years ago we brought some crabs in here, to me just isn't a real high tourist attractor to me. So I would lean more towards, extending the railing. I think that was your option too, with some kiosks with some pictures of the historical building, something like that. And I like the idea when you showed the shot from the water side looking back, to the north is that white sandy beach area, that might be an appropriate place to try to put in like a small kayak launch or something there on the shoreline. If we wanted to add some amenities like that, and that would, right, yeah. So right there, kind of between that palm that's there and the fence, clean that up a little bit, and then people, that's a fairly short distance to carry a kayak down, and you're in shallow water, which makes entry and exit pretty easy. So that's kind of where I would lean to go. So it would provide, and maybe just put, picnic tables out there or something at the end of the piers where people could go and just sit for a little bit or, have a little picnic. I'm not sure I'd put in a whole pavilion and stuff. I think I'd rather, to me, I like more of an open view, particularly from the road looking out. The less structure, the better. I want to be able to see the water and everything behind it. So that'd be kind of my thoughts, just do the railing, maybe some, kiosks with the historical pictures, a picnic table, and then add the, maybe a kayak launch there where the beach is. As far as the existing house, again, we already have like a working waterfront down a little further south. And so again, I could see the draw of that because I wouldn't mind, or probably families with kids, it'd be kind of neat to go down there and see a boat come in and them throwing fish off and stuff. I think that to me is a bigger draw than going to an empty house that says, well, they used to do that, but now they don't. So I guess we could probably do some slight improvements here to stabilize the building and make sure it doesn't blow away. But again, I'd kind of keep that, in my mind, more the minimal side of things. That's just kind of what I would look at. But I think opening the walkway to people going out there and looking at the water and sitting down and having a picnic lunch and the kayak launch would offer a lot of easy public access and public use and keep our costs relatively low. So that's just, for whatever it's worth, that's where I'm at. Commissioner Fleischer?
Well,
what were you thinking
you
16 years ago?
You and I were the only two that rode this storm, this chartered storm. I mentioned charter because just I want to just refresh all our memories. In 2006, we were working on the threat or the subduance of charter government. And if I recall, our first 6 months was rather torrid with that. Stan Mayfield had just brought on the working waterfront. There was a lot of excitement and a lot of energy going on about what can be done to save the buildings, to save the working waterfront, to enhance it for educational purposes, and we were part of that. And the building did look a little better at the time. Father Time has eroded upon it. And I do have some concern. That was just by way of explanation. What were we thinking? Times were different. The environment was different. The pier was different. And there was a lot more positive energy about the working waterfront has to be built up. It was a united front. There was a lot of state money involved. And there was a lot of partnerships and a collaborative that some has come to fruition, some has not. With this in mind, I happen to be in total agreement with Mr. Chairman. Having ridden the storm and looking at what has to be done, I don't think it's even fair or appropriate to come up with an accurate number on rebuilding the original structure. The original structure is in great disrepair. And as far as a new building, well, then that would be a building that people can go into, and it would be an exact footprint replica of the original ice house. But what really public benefit would be gained by going into such a small building where you would see nothing but the ice house? We can bring them into a walk-in freezer in the back of a restaurant, and they'd have the same experience. So with that in mind, I think the location and the history of the operation, perhaps maybe a placard dedicating the ice house, the endeavor, the activity, leaving the rails intact, and perhaps maybe having one of the rail cars there, as is over by Kraby Bill's, that Charlie Sembler had manufactured. I think that would be a great element of return to yesteryear, the history, but I'm in total agreement there. Make it user-friendly for the people. It's the people's dock, it's the people's site, and so maybe perhaps a hybrid of enhancing the pier for a little kayak launch or social gatherings, educational endeavors, and but also have a bit of the history. I believe that's very important to mark the site. So, in total agreement, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Urman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you know, I love my history, and I'm all about history, but I gotta agree with you. I don't know if the Crab House is really a tourist destination of type thing.
Could be one of the top 10 crab houses in Florida, you know.
Yeah, probably could, but
Top
Yeah,
ice house in Florida.
and it's obvious that the termites were holding the hands on this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that that it finally succumbed to time, and just like everything else does, just like we're going to do. I like the idea of just extending the railing, make it a platform, put interpretive signing up there. I think that's really a good idea. I like the idea of what the commissioner said about maybe cleaning that out, maybe letting people use it as a kayak launch or something like that. I think that's really all you need. What was here. I mean, you go to a lot of historical things. You can't recreate battlefields, and you can't do that stuff, but you sure can get a lot out of reading what's there and seeing pictures of what's there. And the technology, you could probably spend money on making it as interactive as you wanted to, or something like that. But being out in the elements, I don't know how all that works. But I like that idea of it, of just making it just extending the railings, making it interactive, making the kayak thing. What is the condition of the house though that's on land? Is it termites holding hands there too, or what?
Yes. The condition is not good. The floor is pretty much missing. It's starting to bow. The siding on it is starting to warp, meaning that the internal components that the siding is nailed to is failing. It's not safe to go inside of that building currently, so doing an assessment's extremely difficult, and it's not been safe for many years. I did the original photographs of the inside of the building, and that was back when we purchased the property. They're probably dated around 2008, 2009, and there was still furniture inside of the building. There was already termite damage at that point in time. The county did do some lead abatement in 2010 that was required, and the building was repainted, and the clapboard was put back into place. I think there was some roofing repairs that were made so that it wasn't leaking inside, but again, it still has the flat roof. The material, the condition of the materials is probably not salvageable. So one of the difficulties that we have on these historic properties is that in order to even salvage the material, it has to be usable material. And in many cases, the material itself is just not usable. We can have sawmills cut similar material to, for instance, reconstruct but I think it's past the point, and maybe it's always been past the point of rehabilitation. There are new considerations, and after having gone through this with the Jones house, which was in very good condition and had been lived in up until Hurricane Matthew, that building is going to require an enormous amount of effort and new material that's replicated to look like old material in order to make that building functional. But it was at least in good condition, and it had been lived in for many years up until Hurricane Matthew. This building, to the best of our knowledge, was not lived in 10 years prior to us purchasing it. So, that goes back to it wasn't lived in, from around 96, 97 is the best of our understanding. So that the residence itself is not in good condition.
Okay, well, my thought was if it was savable, maybe we could concentrate on that. But I didn't think it was from a couple of times that I've been by and see it. I didn't think it was, and if it was, then I would say maybe our efforts go into that, but
So maybe-
I would almost take that down to do some really nice, like interpretive signage, some really nice landscape, and let people know what it was. Just open it up for the general public use. It's kind of made like green space when I talked to Mike and Jason about our parks, and you'd all have this conversation how important just green space and open spaces and open views and things like that. And I think just doing that would be a plus. I mean, I would love to recreate old buildings and all this stuff, but anytime you put a historical tab on it, if I correct in saying the price goes up about double on anything that you say, or try to do the way the old masters used to create crafts and build things and all this sort of stuff. And I can remember when the Judas still lived there, and it was being kind of still used and everything else. But I would just, unless the state or the federal government was going to land this ticket, I don't see us spending county money on it.
So maybe today we should just focus on giving staff direction on the Bath Ice House portion. And then over the next month or two, Beth, maybe you could arrange tours for the commissioners to come up and take a look at the house, and then come back in 2 months with an agenda item, and we'll, probably, I think, lean towards demoing it, but at least we'd have a chance to eyeball it and get a good look. But keep our focus here on just the Bath Ice House portion and give them direction to move forward on that.
Well, my point was could you still spend money on the original house versus
Right.
spending on the pavilion? So.
I think we ought to look at that separately. So, Commissioner Adams?
Yes, thank you.
Because we always love to hear your comments.
I'm sure you guys do. Question, the property across the street on the west side, what is the plans with that? Because the house there and the shed has been removed. Is there a plan?
So what's interesting about our properties that did not receive Florida Communities Trust funding, a management plan was never completed. So there's a conceptual management plan which has a conceptual map, which would be a pavilion and a small little trail area, and probably fenced off, with sort of a split rail type of fence to delineate the property. Currently, the customers from Captain Butcher's regularly park on that property, even though we have made some efforts to ask Captain Butcher's to not let them park there. There are some large oak trees there, and there's a little bit of area that could be enhanced and utilized as like a passive park. There's not a lot of room for parking on the site. However, there's a large City of Sebastian parking lot that is just one lot to the south. So, the idea being that people could park in that area and then walk to the fish house or this little kind of what Ruth likes to call pocket parks. So there was sort of a conceptual plan for that, but nothing had ever been formalized in any way, and we didn't have any obligation to meet, from a grant standpoint for that particular area.
So the reason I ask is I know while the goal today is to provide direction specifically on the dock and the crab house area, the whole property was purchased together, and we need to look at how all those pieces are going to fit together to provide an amenity, because it is one property. And I find when we try to start planning parks in segments without some cohesive overall thought, you end up with exactly that, some segmented, disconnected project that at the end of the day doesn't really pay homage to what it was intended to do. So I have actually been out to the fish house in the past, I think right before you guys put up the yellow floating thingy, which I'm sure has a more efficient official name. Turbidity, thank you, that. But it was, to me, it was amazing that crab house hadn't fallen into the water before. Just the fact that it was concrete, and you have the wind and the shifting and gravity in general. It's amazing that it has lasted that long. The house, when you guys go out there, just That's another one that I'm surprised is really still standing. And I know we've had some discussion on historic structures over the past, my tenure here anyway. This is not one that is, I feel, we could try to save it. And you guys know I love old places and would love to save every single one of them. But I recognize that I think this is beyond that point, just because of the elements. So as sad as it makes me to say, I would agree that we probably need to look at Plan B, which is really paying homage to what was there and trying to create a public amenity that will actually be used by the public. I will just point out for a walk back in time, this property in Captain Butcher's in the Jackson Square area was really intended to be the core of the working waterfront, but because of different things that happened, the focus was shifted to the Hurricane Harbor property. So that's one of the reasons why you do have the parking lot area, the public parking lot you have at Jackson Street, why there's that extra landscaping there, and why this property was, to help get you guys out of trouble, why one of the reasons that the county kind of considered this property because of that working waterfront.
Oh, I remember that now. Thank you, Commissioner. It all came back to me.
It wasn't just...
It was brilliant back then, just brilliant.
But you are also correct. When it was purchased, it wasn't in the best of shape to begin with. So I think there might have been some expectations that just were never going to come to reality there. So let's talk about what our options are. I would definitely agree that putting a replica of the ice house would really serve no purpose. It's generally not a good idea to have multiple enclosed rooms with nobody there to monitor what's going on in them. That also being said, though, I feel like that pier, as it stands, is not really big enough to put picnic tables on. So if you wanted to put picnic tables or something of that nature that people could enjoy the end of the pier and the lookout, you would really need to extend that deck a bit further and possibly put a pavilion on top of it, because there really is no public access or area on the lagoon, particularly in that North County area, that has some covered to get you out of the elements, maybe allow you to eat your lunch. The other thing I will note is that this is at the end of that sidewalk of Sebastian. So it could possibly create a nice ending point for an area that's really utilized a lot by walkers and bikers and the public. And if you look at it kind of as the beginning or the end of that lagoon walkway area, we could really kind of make this something that people would come out to see. But I do agree that the fish house itself, probably not a good idea, or that crab house. So what I would envision is a picnic pavilion area. Obviously, that would require the dock to be extended. There are some permitting issues with that. There would be some extra cost, but now is really the time to explore that, since we really just took it down, and DEP has kind of indicated to us they would be willing to allow us to put something else up, but if we decide we want to do that next year, they're going to say no. So, and then maybe just I would like to see just a plain pavilion with some kiosks in the middle and some picnic tables that kind of evoke or pay homage to what that was. And then as we move and think about the entire property, I do think and would agree with what has been said prior, that the kayak launching or any kind of access would be best done from the beach. There is a lack of that on-beach access too, especially in this area of Indian River Drive. But I would like to see the building, when we get to that point, possibly not saved, but recreated in some way, just plain open, without walls, just kind of the shell, because I know there has been discussions with people that would possibly be interested in doing something with that, providing some enhanced public access, and I think there might be some future opportunities. And before we even get to possible partnerships or future opportunity, there's always a need for community space. inside community space, particularly for our community groups that want to get together, have meetings. The smaller groups, there's just a lack of public space for that people can meet at and doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And I think this could be a good opportunity for that as we move into looking at that overall plan. So I know, as sad as it is for me to say, I do agree that where we have gone with this is good, but I would hope that my fellow commissioners would consider my comments.
Absolutely. Commissioner Moss.
Thank you, first of all, for this complete history of this project. I mean, you gave such a great view of it. I think, in reviewing the history of it, I guess the focal point has shifted from this property being historic to public use at this point. And I agree with what's been said about taking a minimalist approach, and that being either a handrail or a picnic pavilion. I love the pier. I think I would like to see a place for people to sit, and that might be just benches, maybe benches running around the, parallel to the railing, something like that. I don't know, because it's true, there's not a lot of space there for picnic tables if we're talking about just the end of the pier. So the choice then would be to arrange a pavilion, but then that obstructs the view from the shoreline, as our chairman pointed out. And, I agree with that. You might not want to do it right there. Maybe should the house be demolished, put a pavilion in place of the house, and that way you don't have obstruction of view. You do have a picnic area or a community space, as Commissioner Adams pointed out, and we certainly do need those. So, I mean, definitely minimalist, and definitely in favor of community spaces and a place for people to sit and enjoy. This is a beautiful area. So you were not all wrong, to my two colleagues. It's a beautiful area, and I'm glad it's ours for the public use. So thank you.
So Beth, I'm fine with Commissioner Adams' thoughts of, extending the deck out, as long as it's not going to cost us an arm and a leg from DEP to get it done, okay? And I think there's we might be able to extend the deck out, but if we want to put another roof structure, I'm sure DEP will start screaming about seagrass beds and all that, and I don't want us to have to pay $200,000 to mitigate a couple hundred square feet of potential, even though I know there used to be a roof there and a cement concrete floor. I think DOP will look at, well, we've opened this up now, we want to keep it open kind of thing. So I'm fine with going down that path as long as it doesn't cost us a real arm and a leg to get it done. So I could go along with that. Again, just it's got to be reasonable permitting.
I think Wendy can speak to the permitting aspects. Certainly now would be the time to permit that type of structure if we wanted to do that. One option that we could do, if the board would like, is to do an RFP. Is Jennifer here? There she is. We could put out an RFP to where companies could provide a design with a cost. Jennifer, you might have to speak to that because she's saying yes. So my thought would be, instead of us going into a lot of effort to design something and then find out it's too expensive to build it, we could do a request for proposals. We could see what options companies might bring to us, and then we could bring that to the board for consideration. In doing that, it would shorten that window. We could potentially include permitting in that so that the company is, permitting whatever they designed. And then you would have an option as to which design you liked. We'd also have the cost associated with that so that you would then know, what you're getting into, so to speak. I don't at this point in time, because this is part of our solvent submerged land lease with the state, I don't foresee it being a big mitigation project at this point. Certainly as time marches on, that window would start to close and shorten, over a period of time. I didn't mention in the presentation, So for the main residence house, there is an opportunity to apply for a large category DHR grant. However, we have applied for those in the past and they are doled out very minimally. I don't know that this particular project would compete well, and it would be a lot of staff time to put together a proposal only to find out that they're only funding the top 3 projects in the state. It's very difficult for us to compete with that.
Yeah, no.
As far as I can tell, the Stan Mayfield Working Waterfront has not been active for several years, so that's also not an option. I do have some concerns about potentially creating a replica, which we would totally be entitled to do since there's no grant obligations and we own the property. However, we would need to talk to the building department about the building permit constraints that I think would exist that close to the shoreline. And in addition to that, that type of structure, if we did build a new structure, would not, qualify for the exemptions for a historic structure, since it would be a, recreation. It would have to meet all of the new building codes, and then it would likely not be insurable because it would be partially over water. So risk management would have to speak to that in more detail. And I'm with Commissioner Adams in that I think all of us are just heartbroken that this piece of remain this little bit of history that we lose it. But at some point, whether or not there's public benefit there to justify the cost, we could put a lot of effort into doing a video, for instance, that could be shown at the site or potentially, on our channel 27, documenting the site for very little cost. We could do really nice interpretive educational signage that really tells the full story. And, there may be other educational opportunities that we could really invest in that would be minimal cost, but a bigger bang for the buck. And it does, I love these historic structures too. And we have a lot of them. So we're salvaging the ones that we can. And it is very difficult. I know that there was a lot of comment from the public about the loss of the building, but.
Wendy, do you think it's reasonable that we'll be able to permit, say, extending a dock there or putting some type of shaded structure on that?
You're looking at, can you hear me okay? Is this on?
It's on, just I guess.
If you're looking at using the existing footprint where the ice house was, I think we're in good shape.
Okay.
I think the time lag that Beth is worried about is seagrass issues. The longer we wait, how ephemeral seagrass is, and if we wait too long. But one comment I did want to make about the actual residence itself is I just wondered, we have a lot of funding from FIND and from Florida Boater Improvement Funds and all of that for the kayak and whatever, the pavilion, that type of thing. I do wonder if we put out an RFP, if we wouldn't need to look at some sort of site planning if we actually put a building back, because then we'd be into how do you cross the road, where do you park, those kind of issues.
And it's
so
the
I just
city
was
of
curious about
Sebastian.
that. It would be the city of Sebastian, right?
Okay, but we can go ahead, as Beth recommended, and go out for an RFP for a proposal to put a dock in on the original footprint and some type of shaded picnic thing and see what comes back, and we can get that out pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't think the shading is really an issue because at this point, the dock that with the building.
There's concrete floor and all that, yeah.
I mean, if you were doing this from scratch, they'd probably want you to put in more of a see-through type decking and all of that. But I think we can certainly get some options on what would be the most cost-effective way of doing that.
Okay. So, Commissioners, what I would recommend is maybe have a motion to move forward with Beth's recommendation for an RFP, and then maybe bring this back in a couple months to talk about the house and the property to the west as a comprehensive plan. Any commissioners that want to take a tour, get a hold of staff and go out there and take a look, but at least get moving on this aspect. As we've heard, time is of the essence, so give staff direction, move forward on that.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. In addition, so long as it's collective of a site tour, I'd like to see a little bit more. Again, since it's been probative to go into the building, that's where I live. I pass that all the time, and it is what it appears to be, and the wood is a little on the soft edge, but I'd like the opportunity to see a little bit more before we make a sound.
Yeah, that's, I think when they bring it back in a couple of months, we'll have that opportunity.
But so moved.
All right, I'll second that. So we have a motion to move forward with an RFP for the dock and picnic area by Commissioner Flesher, second by myself. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries 5-0. And, yeah, Beth, I'll get a hold of you because I would like to take a tour of that and take a look, so we'll get out there. Okay.
We could pick mushrooms off the building.
Commissioners, I received an email here from Amy Cooper, who is the Chief Financial Officer for the Sheriff's Office. This morning's presentation on the grant application, Sheriff indicated he wasn't asking for anything, but technically they do need a letter to go out signed by myself as chairman. So I think we should entertain a motion just approving the sheriff to apply for that grant so we can get a letter out and sign the application.
Mr. Chair, so moved to supply a letter of support and intent for the grant.
We have a motion by Commissioner Flesher, a second by Vice Chair Ehrman. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye. 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 Any opposed? That carries 5-0. Thank you for letting us jump back to that, Commissioners. We now get back to departmental matters, Office of Management and Budget, and adoption of updated purchasing manual. Good morning, still morning. Oh, just in time. Good morning, Jennifer. Quick.
For the record, Jennifer Hyde, County Purchasing Manager. The county code gives the county administrator authority to create our purchasing policies that we follow. And those are detailed in our purchasing manual, which we review constantly, but we try and do formal updates to it periodically as needed. These updates typically fall out from changes to the federal code that we follow when using federal funds, Florida statutes. We also try to improve efficiencies in our processes and to also make our procedures more clear. Although the board isn't required to approve it, we've historically brought our changes before the board just as a courtesy. I'd like to touch on just a few of the proposed changes that were noted in the staff report. First one is the Code of Federal Regulations that we do follow after a hurricane or for other federally funded projects. Were expanded, primarily relating to the addition of a domestic preference clause. So we've added that to the purchasing manual. And as a piggyback to that requirement for all of our purchases, we have added the requirement that U.S. flags purchased to be flown at county facilities are made in the USA as well. Two changes previously directed by the board have been added. The first is the 3-year limit to the designation for something as a sole source. And then the second is a requirement for consultants to provide a 10-year litigation history as part of a response to an RFQ. We increased the time limit for a bidder to request the opportunity to withdraw their bid from 24 to 48 hours because we felt 24 was just really tight for a contractor to take a look and see where they might have made a mistake once they see the results of a bid opening and to address those discrepancies. 2 new sections were added. The first details procedures for the purchase of any IT-related items such as computers, hardware, software, phones, and related accessories. This addition and these procedures enable the IT department to standardize our equipment, enhances their ability to manage our networks, and ensures that anything that's being purchased is actually appropriate for the way we're set up. And then finally, we added an appendix section with hyperlinks to checklists, policies, and other reference information. By hyperlinking these in here, we can update those continually instead of having to wait until the manual is updated. That summarizes the changes we wanted to highlight. Our recommendation is for the board to note concurrence with the changes to the manual. But at this time, I'm happy to address any questions or suggestions the board may have regarding the manual.
So Jennifer, I just had 2 things. One is in the staff backup, the first bullet point there, add a requirement for the U.S. flags to be purchased that were made in the USA. I think that's good. I'd hate to think we're flying a flag made in China or something, so I'm glad with that. About the 6th bullet point down was one item said added instruction that when quotes are obtained, the lowest quote is expected to be selected. I had a little bit of concern that that might be backing us into a corner, because commissioners, you know, we always have the right to reject the lowest bid if we think. But in the actual attachment, the document, the wording is the lowest quote should be selected unless otherwise authorized by the purchasing manager. So I think we still are afforded that capability to not take the lowest quote. So I think I'm okay with that now. Is that good, Jason? Okay. So that's the only real two comments I had. Anybody else have anything to add on that? If not, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Adams, second by Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye. Any opposed? That carries 5-0. Thank you, Jennifer. Moving on now to county administrative matters. First item on the county attorney is Administrative Policy AM 604.1 amendment. Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much. Administrative Policy 604.1 of the Indian River County Administrative Policy Manual states as follows. It is the policy of the county to prohibit solicitation and distribution on its premises by non-employees, except that non-employees making solicitation or distribution of materials of a political nature may distribute materials or solicit signatures for petitions in a non-disruptive manner on county property, but not within county buildings. I believe this was designed for traditionally allow for the use of the areas in front of Building A, Building B, the areas at the administrative complex. I personally did not believe that this policy intended to cover sort of those non-traditional public fora, such as the golf course, the shooting range, the inside areas of our pools that people play to use. Thus, County Attorney's Office just wanted to make it clear that we recommended updating the policy to reflect that the non-public fora areas such as Sand Ridge, the shooting range, and the North County Aquatic Center and the Ecftx Aquatic Center would also be excluded from the areas where solicitation or political speech would occur. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
So Dylan, in the backup, the underlying suggested policy change does not include the pools. Was it your intent to include the pools with this policy change? You list Sandwich Golf Club and the county shooting range, but not the two pools.
Yeah, and part of that was actually I did a further research assignment this weekend where I went out to the North County Pool and the shooting range in addition to my previous trip to Sand Ridge. And I'm happy to include naming the North County Aquatic Center and the Gifford Aquatic Center within that list, but also defer to staff or comments from the board on other policy decisions related to that.
Commissioners, any questions of Dylan?
No.
Well, my preference would be to go ahead and, in the wording change to the policy, to go ahead and include both of the pool facilities, because again, people are paying to go into those areas, and I think between the library and the county buildings and such, there's plenty of opportunities to collect petitions and such that we don't want to be kind of interfering with paying customers coming into a county facility. So I'd love to entertain a motion including the pools in the motion.
And Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to make that motion, and that would be inclusive of not only just petitions, but any political endeavor or
okay,
and other solicitations.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can say. We have a second by Vice Chair Ehrman. Any, and you're clear, just add the pools to what your proposed wording?
Absolutely happy to add the naming of the pools.
Great. Any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye. Any opposed? That motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
And next, under county attorneys, is the Town of Indian River Shores, City of Vero Beach, federal litigation. And I would like to acknowledge that we do have Town Council Member Bob Atwater here with us in the audience. Bob, thanks for sitting through everything and spending your morning here with us. We hope you enjoyed it. So with that, Mr. Reingold.
The town of Indian River Shores has filed a suit in federal court against the city of Vero Beach concerning the agreement between Indian River County and the city of Vero Beach titled Setting Service Areas for Water and Sewer Service, Memorializing Certain Water and Sewer Allocations, and repealing prior agreements dated August 18th, 1989. The city has moved to dismiss this lawsuit. One of its arguments is that the town had failed to name an indispensable or a necessary party, the county. County has consistently taken the position that this matter is really a dispute between the town and the city. Thus, although I am hesitant to get involved in this matter, I wish to have the county to avoid being named in any suit relating to this issue. It's my understanding that at a recent hearing, the federal judge had asked various questions about the county's intent or interest in the federal litigation. Thus, I recommend to the board to authorize the county attorney's office to file papers with the other parties or with the court, reiterating the county's position that the county has no interest in being involved in this litigation. I will note that the county is not taking a position. It is not my intent to take a position with regards to any other arguments raised by either the town or the city against each other in this federal litigation, except I will state that I do disagree with a statement that actually the town made in its response to the motion to dismiss, in which they stated the town and the county have initiated contract negotiations for the county to provide essential water services to the town beginning in 2027. I am not aware of such negotiations having been initiated, and I just want to make sure that was clear in discussing this matter. So basically, my only goal today is just to have the board to authorize the county attorney to file some form of papers, either with the parties or with the court, just clarifying that we have no interest in being involved in this litigation. And with that, I'm available for questions.
And Dylan, the only thing I would suggest is that we don't want to be involved in the litigation, but that we have always taken the position that this is an issue between the town and the city, and that we will abide with whatever the judge decides.
I will be happy to include that in any documents or papers that get filed.
Yeah, I think we just want to clarify that we've been consistently saying this is between the town and the city. I think that's what we need to tell the judge, is that's been our position. We don't want to be involved, and we'll abide by whatever the judge says. Would be where I think we should be.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've rated this subject time and time again. I would agree with the county staff's proposal and your inferences to be placed in there. With that, I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Ehrman, second by Commissioner Flesher. Is there any comment on the motion before us? Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify with aye. Any opposed? That carries 5-0. And we come to our last item under Commissioner matters, under my matters, appointment of Jeff Stassi as an alternate to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee. Commissioners, a couple months back, Honey Minus, a Vero Beach City Council member, approached me and said she thought that Mr. Stassi would be a very valuable member of the SEDS committee. However, at that time, I informed her that all 5 of our county commission appointments had been filled. And then, so the discussion then turned if whether Mr. Stassi could be an alternate. We checked with Regional Planning Council staff, and they were fine with the addition of an alternate member. I believe Martin County has 1 or 2 alternate members listed for their SEDS committee. And my intent would be that Mr. Stassi would just be appointed as an alternate for any of our 5 positions, so that if one of the appointed 5 could not make it, then Mr. Stassi could fill in for any of the appointees. So that's kind of where all this came from, and just looking to see if the board would be interested in appointing Mr. Stassi as an alternate.
I'd be happy to make that motion for you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I'll second it. Is there any discussion?
Is there a problem with attendance? I mean, is there a reason why we need an alternate?
I know that at least my in the past, we've had a lot of vacancies. And secondly, I know that my appointee had said she may have some conflicts down the road. So I think this is just making sure that we have full representation, because they are undergoing the process of redoing or upgrading the 5-year plan. So I think it's very important that we have as full representation as we can get. So
We did have a presentation at Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council on Friday regarding the SEDS plan, so I think it's timely, and it never hurts to have, a backup in the event. Hopefully, we don't need them, but if we do, we've already covered our bases.
Do you know if there are other applications on file for this?
I do not believe so.
This isn't an item that typically comes through the county attorney's office as one of our committees to monitor, so I'm not aware of any. I just haven't been tracking this as a application issue.
Okay. Do you know how this is usually handled? Is this opening, shall we say, usually posted in any way, or other people? I'm just, in the interest of being transparent and fairness.
So typically, Indian River County's appointees has operated as each of the 5 commissioners had appointed someone to the SEDS committee of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. So there hasn't been any vetting or, openings or the like. It's just simply the 5 of you have the right to choose somebody. This was just a new approach taken by the chair as to deciding whether the commission wanted an alternate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
That motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Moss opposed. That concludes the agenda, Commissioners. Unless there's anything else good for the community, we will stand adjourned. And no, we're going to make sure everybody shows up for the Vero Beach Air Show. And I want to make sure that those Blue Angels fly low, fly fast, and fly loud.
Sound of freedom, sir.
It's sound of freedom, you bet. With that, we're adjourned.